For our Canadian lifters, pure passion, real results, what you put in your body should matter. Pure Vita Labs PVL supplements are clean, tested, and approved, powering athletes for over 25 years. They also power the KOTL podcast. You could trust PVL. Use code KOTL15 for partnership pricing at PVL.com. Six-pack Lapadat. We got Kedric Kwan from Reformance. And my man, you've been all over. You've had a lot of success lately. You're all over the place and people are tagging you. But what are just some of the clients some people might recognize you from?
Well, I guess, first of all, thanks for having me back again. I think the last time I was here was like after Sweden, right? That's like really long ago.
The first Sweden, though. Wasn't it 2019?
The first Sweden.
Like the first Sweden, dude, 4 years ago. And I still, was it 2000? It was 2019. Time flies. I still remember you back then. And yeah, man. Time flies. But yeah, thanks for coming on, dude. Thanks for
no
coming
worries. Pleasure is mine. I think that talking about Sweden as well has like some relevance, because I guess if you can look at sort of like phase one of my emergence, I would say, would definitely be Sweden. Obviously, the battle between Taylor Atwood and Kel, right? So that's kind of like my emergence into the scene when I helped Taylor with his nutrition back then. And then that's when people start, and I was doing surveys about like rapid weight cutting and all that kind of stuff. And then people were just like, oh, there's this guy, and when I was on the podcast, then we talked about rapid weight cutting. My mic quality was way, way worse than this. So hopefully the audio now sounds so much better.
It does.
And yeah, basically, basically that was, kind of like my emergence. And then you mentioned now, like I've been all over the place, and what lifters I am associated with. I think like Taylor Atwood is definitely still like there, the top dog, been working with him for 4 years. And the big thing would obviously be Sheffield, right? Recently, Sheffield, Evie Corrigan's surprise attack, and
was that you?
I helped out here and there with the cut, right? So it's not all me. I just help her with her nutrition, help her with the cut, making sure she trains well, communicate with Jason.
Jason but Clark, you were her nutritionist, though, is what I meant, yes. Not a programmer. Yeah, dude, that's the big piece of it, though. Like for anyone listening, Evie dropped from 57 kilo to 52 kilos class completely. As a 57, she was world class, but outside of like the elite of elite. I don't think she podium at Worlds, but just off of podium. Like she was good, world class, no doubt, top 10, top 5. But when she dropped from 57 kilos to 52 kilos and retained almost all of her strength, all of a sudden her strength compared to 52s, now she wins Sheffield, the biggest powerlifting competition of all time, wins a massive bag and is the queen. And it's like, holy smokes. So that's a huge props to yourself, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's actually quite hard to believe like how much like nutrition plays a role, especially in 2019, back in the days, people would be like, yeah, powerlifters just eat whatever they want, right? And then at the highest level, like everyone now wants some form of nutrition coaching or some like advice on what to eat. At Sheffield, that was obviously Evie with nutrition, Taylor Atwood, Gavin Aiden as well, and obviously Emil Krastev, which I also do his powerlifting coaching, right? So I would say that in the recent times, these are like the four like big names I've been associated with. I guess in the past, I would probably say like obviously had a corner with nutrition. In the past, there was like Leonardo Suchitra for in Australia, 74 kilo, and then back like before the whole COVID thing, like Chris Kennedy. So like these are some of the lifters that you can say I can associate my name with, but obviously the four that I mentioned previously are the more recent names. So
those are some big names. Those are some big names. It's some of the tasks in terms of when you're doing nutrition. Some of it isn't so bad. I mean, so bad, like Taylor's, as the years go by, you kind of get it dialed in. And some of the tasks, so it's kind of like, okay, it's a little more the same, but if someone ages as an athlete, you want to make sure they're recovering, et cetera. And you always got to keep an eye on things, and things change for them. Their body changes a little bit, but other tasks that will come your way will be like the Evie Corrigan project, where it's like, okay, I'm top 5 in the world as a 57, but if you can somehow help me retain my strength as much as possible and drop down a weight class, I could literally be the best in the world. And it was crazy for her to do a 460 kilo total as a 52. How much do you think nutrition plays a role in this? Because I think some people might have a bit of a blind spot even still to nutrition with powerlifting.
Yeah, so I guess nutrition for powerlifting, there's like two major elements, right? The first one would be the weight cutting process, right? I'm not saying that that is the only part that's important, because the way I look at nutrition, I always tell the lifters I work with, I say nutrition is like Robin to Batman and training's Batman. So Robin acts as a support. The goal of nutrition before all the cutting is to ensure that regardless of your goals, whether you're trying to gain lean mass, whether you're trying to lose fat, drop some pounds of your body, the goal is to support your training. And I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, but I'm kind of like a realist in the sense of you can't have 100% good training sessions every single session, day in, day out, especially when you're at a high level. Every single training session will go exactly like how you want it. I don't think that's something realistic to believe in, but I do think that the role of nutrition can be helpful in allowing you to maximize the amount of good training sessions that you have and reduce the poor ones. And nutrition does play a big role. Obviously, sleep as well. I do categorize nutrition and sleep as like lifestyle factors. Training, when you go into training, you'd be like, oh yeah, even though you go in the gym, you talk a bunch of crap with people, you spend 4 or 5 hours at the gym, but your nutrition, your life and your sleep, all those lifestyle factors consist of a larger time frame, right? So essentially what we're trying to do is all the things that you have to do outside the gym, we're trying to kind of like allow that to be conducive so that your training will go well. So I look at it, nutrition, from that perspective. We can go into details about like, how what should you eat before you train? How is eating for like gaining mass versus cutting weight? And then obviously the second part, which is very important, is the weight cutting process. How much weight can you cut within 1 week? How quickly can you rehydrate and refill within the 2 hours? What you should do after that. So there's those two elements, right? Something more longer term, right? And then the shorter one, where usually happens the last 7 days right up to the competition. So I think that is where nutrition comes in, like these two, like I would say, like time frames in relation to powerlifting training.
When you're looking at this, and I think, yeah, let's go into those two topics. Like the long term, for sure, if you're cutting, and then obviously the water cuts and the recomp, even like eating the day of. These are things that like so many people fumble the bag when it comes to the water cut. They can have enough, do everything phenomenal. Water cut comes, and then we've seen cramping. And why cramping might happen in terms of, did they not get enough electrolytes in, or what might have happened there, as well as eating on the day of. Some people don't eat the day of, or don't eat as much, not enough like they think they could. What should they be eating? Like, what food do you actually digest quick enough to turn into energy in time? And what food maybe to avoid in terms of, look, you can eat this now, but that's not going to be in your system and you're not going to be using that as energy until probably, when you're already at the banquet, you know what I mean? Or something like that. So that's like day of at the end. But then also obviously cutting during and what you think might be appropriate cutting, appropriate body size cutting, if there's percentages that are more realistic, how far out you cut, and then how far out maybe you should be done cutting and be balancing out by a certain point. Or if you have to, by timeline, you're cutting right up to the comp. And it's like, all right, but you're going to have no balance out in between. And then even, talking about some people aren't cutting. They're not cutting at all. But how them not tracking their what they're eating, or at least paying attention, might be impacting them in a way they're not even aware of. Because some people are like, I don't need to cut to make my weight. Jiren's actually didn't really need to cut to make his weight, nothing too crazy, but he was under eating and he didn't necessarily realize it. And when he started working with a nutritionist, he started realizing, I need to eat more. My workouts are way better. Endurance total is blown up in the 83s. For anyone listening, the British champion, European champion hit 820.5 kilos. And previous to that, I mean, he was floating below 800, sorry. And, a lot of people, Paul Matthews has come on talking about how, like, just recognizing this more to your point of how it's evened out their training and how possible timing of the food, what food and when to eat it before a workout. So I'm not sure which one do you think we should do first? What do you think? We got a lot to unpack, my friend, but this is a big topic.
Oh yeah. 100%. I think we can kind of like start. I mean, you mentioned Durin's, right? So I didn't mention him just now, but I mean, I do Durin's nutrition as well. So
who's don't you, huh? I promise you, I forgot that you did his nutrition, but all right, I'm glad it was you and I wasn't bringing up someone else. Anyways, there you go. Well, good job again with another person, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Durin's is a prime example as well, in the sense that if you look, there's always this like conception that, like powerlifters have to be cutting weight, but Durin's was different, right? Durin's is like, okay, cool, he's severely under eating, right? He's training adaptations are not being maximized. The ability to train is not being maximized just because he's not fueling his body enough. So that's a clear example of situation one, where I mentioned previously, where you want to like maximize the good sessions and the ability to perform well. You want to maximize those, because situation two doesn't apply to Durin's, because Durin doesn't cut into competition. So, but we do see that, he's leaving some potential on the platform, because situation one, which is all the training adaptations and eating enough, was not maximized. So like I said, you kind of have to maximize both aspects to the best of your ability. And like, for example, if we look at the ability to gain weight, lose weight, make weight, right? So there's this like three sort of like categories: gaining weight, losing weight, making weight. The big thing is simply like, what is a realistic amount to cut from, right? So you use that. What I do is that I use that as a threshold, right? So I don't want to exceed the threshold. Okay. So based on the research, for most elite lifters, so this is not like a causal research meaning that this thing causes that, right? So it's more, it's like a survey. So essentially what I did was I looked at what the high level lifters do. And then I said, roughly high level lifters, they tend to cut within this range. And in the high level lifters within that cohort, we also saw that those that cut tend to win more medals. I'm not saying that if you cut, you win more medals, but perhaps the factor is that you're already at the top end, hence you have to cut, right? Because you are already an experienced lifter. Maybe you have almost maxed out your weight class with like muscle mass, therefore you have to cut. So it's not like, oh, if I cut, I'll win medals. So just by looking at that, right, the survey showed like high level lifters usually cut around like 4.2% of their body weight. Okay. And when I say cut as well, I use cutting as a very loose term, because it's more like it's like a scoping, right? Like a more broad cutting. I'm not saying like, oh, how much do you lose from this method. I don't ask them into like specifics. So if we use that 4.2% as a threshold, we can say, okay, if you are like, you compete in the 83, right? 4.2% is probably close to 3.5 kilos. Okay.
Okay.
Right. So meaning that you probably want to sit like 86.5 or lower. Okay. And that is also what I found in the study was that besides the medals, right, the other significant finding was that meet experience tend to result in more higher chances of meddling as well. And if you think about it, maybe perhaps that meet experience is allowed them to know how to cut, right? Because going into your first meet, if you cut, you might not be familiar with the cutting process. It may be difficult, nerves and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Taylor Atwood, like Taylor told me this at Sheffield. He said that, we've been working together for 4 years, right? But every time you're here in person with me, right, I feel much more assured. So just being there, knowing that you don't have to think about the whole cutting process, you can just focus on lifting, right? Gives the lifter a huge relief. So on the flip side, if there's someone who has never cut, doesn't even have a coach, and tries cutting for the first time, there's a likelihood that it may not go well, especially if they have a lot to cut. And in that same survey, we found that lifters who tend to be like less elite, what I used was at that point, I used like Wilks score because Wilks was the score used in research, like a lower Wilks score, they tend to cut less as well, right? So it may just be a selection bias because obviously if you are lower, maybe your body weight's not as high, right? So you don't have to cut as much, or perhaps you're not as experienced, so you tend to diet a little bit more. You don't know what is the threshold your body can be at and make weight, so you're not risking things. So it may just completely be a selection bias because, like I said, this is a survey. It's not like a randomized control trial where I look at I try to create a causal mechanism. So back to the question, we set a threshold. I generally like to factor multiple factors in, and I always look for opportunities to not cut as much, right? Reasons to not cut as much rather than opportunities to justify cutting higher. What I mean by that is that if you're traveling, I want you to cut less if you're traveling, right? Because
when you mean cut less, do you mean like your body weight's already closer to competition? So you mean like water cut less?
Yes, water cut less, right? Yeah,
gotcha.
And for example, South Africa was a big, it was a clear example because South Africa was quite unfamiliar to almost everyone, right? Even for the Europeans, South Africa was still quite unfamiliar with like the environment. So in that instance, I would say, like, first of all, Sun City, we don't really know what's around. It's not like a town where you can just walk into the grocery and just get whatever you want. So by allowing you to be a little bit more conservative in terms of how much you start your rapid weight cut, you just maximize your chances of success, right? Because you minimize you're basically minimizing the uncertainty that may result in you not making weight. So for example, like last year in South Africa, I worked with Max Scanlon. So Max Scanlon, 63 kilo world champ, right? Took the opportunity to win, obviously, when the unfortunate event when Leah didn't make weight. So, and she won on body weight because essentially like the top three were all like the same total, right? But Mac was like really light. And if you ask me, I don't really know whether Mac's training would be better if she was slightly heavier, whether she would perform better, and she didn't have to wait. She didn't have to tie on body weight to be world champion. But the fact of the matter was that because of things like the meet is like late in the day because of Eurosport, South Africa is unfamiliar. This is also my first time ever working with Meg, and not to mention she had to travel. So I'm like, okay, cool. With all these elements, right? If I plug all of this in, it gives me more reason to be a little bit more conservative in how much she can cut, right? Because if she doesn't make weight, right, it's on me. Like it's on me if she doesn't make weight. And
right. That's got to be so stressful for you when you're at these events. You're like, you're making weight, especially for the high profile athlete.
Yeah. So like, it's on me if she doesn't make weight, right? Once she makes weight, right, we can say that, cool, even if she performs poorly, I can then, I'm not trying to shift the play, but it can be like, there are more things to attribute like the failure to perform on the platform Maybe it could be the weight making process. Maybe it could be the training, the taper, or the peaking wasn't right. Maybe it could just be nerves on the competition day. So there are multiple elements to attribute failure on the platform. But if she doesn't make weight, there's only one. It's me, man. It's me. Like, it's all my fault.
The thing is, sort of, there is some onus on the lifter as well. Like, sometimes they're not completely transparent with things, and you're like, you should have told me this earlier. Or, things pop up and you're like, you're trying to fix some problems that they did or something happened. And you're like, I could do my best, but I'm not a magician. I'm a nutritionist, so I understand it's on you, but it's not 100% on you. But although it probably feels good for the lifter to be like, this has nothing to do with me. Let's just let that guy take everything. Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually how things are. Right. And it's funny because, like I said, another person that I've been recently associated with obviously Matt Gary, because I contributed a book chapter about like making weight and cutting. And in his book chapter, he said that if he has no sympathy for lifters who don't make weight, because you are like letting down your country, your sponsors, your team, all of that, right? But it's quite crazy if you think about it, when the nutrition coach, this person has a nutrition coach and doesn't make weight, right? Then it'd be like really bad. I mean, there's an example, man. There's an example, right? I hate to bring up Leah again, but I used to work with Leah, and in South Africa, when she did make weight, everybody thought that it was my fault.
I was all over you. I was like, what are you doing, Kedric? Because you know what? I was trying to shift blame because somehow I got blamed for that. And I was like, no. That was Kedric. It was Kedric. Yeah. So people were blaming me, man. I got defensive. No. I almost made a post. I almost made an emergency podcast just to throw you under the bus so it wasn't on me.
Yeah. So like, even then, like when you don't work with the lifter because you have like, you were previously associated with the lifter, people still like to shift the blame, right? And as if this is something that you do as your career and your job, it's kind of like the burden's on you, right? So I mean, like I said, back to the conversation, right? Like I said, for Max Scanlon, like there are these elements that make me basically justifies or is more rational to be slightly more conservative going to the cut. But like I say, I don't know the counterfactual. If she was like slightly heavier, would she have been stronger? Probably, But like I said, I made my decision based on looking at the circumstances that was presented to us. And like, so that is another of my thought process when I look at how you cut, right? So we set the threshold, right? And then we look at elements when let's maybe not push the threshold too much, okay? And then we look at other factors like how far are you away from making weight, okay? Like how far are you from the threshold? If you are like 5 weeks out and your weight is like 1-2% above the threshold that you can cut from, that probably answers your question. You probably have to cut all the way, going into the competition because you're just like slightly too heavy. Which is why when I speak to people, I'm like, I recommend that you come like speak to me or like, start working with me. At least give me 12 weeks. It's not that I want your money. It's not like I want an extra like month of like pay from you. It's just that it's way harder when it's like really close, So that is like something that I always factor in as well. First, you have what is the maximum weight you can lose within the 7 days? Are there any reasons to be a little bit more conservative? Look at where you are right now in relation to the time that you have, and then we kind of like execute the plan, right? So the further you are away from competition, right, the more flexibility you have. So that's kind of like the mindset I have. Coaching lifters, looking at their nutrition, and essentially it's a lot of like communication. It's just like, I just tell them this is the reason why we're doing this right now, right? And I'm like, hey, if you're heavy, sometimes you just, and there's no time, you just really have to suck it up. It's gonna suck, I work with a lifter. You ask for like crazy cutting stories where she was 58 kilos, right? And she wanted to drop to the 52 in 6 weeks. That is probably the craziest cut.
So that's close to 15 pounds. 15, close to 15 pounds on a small person, though.
It's more than 10% of the weight because 6 kilos, 10% is 60 kilos, right? So it's more than 10%. And I typically don't like.
Her name was Evie Corrigan, by the way.
I mean, this lifter also pulled a deadlift record, not at Sheffield, but the reason why she wanted to go in was she wanted to pull the junior deadlift record in like USAPL. So what happened was like, I usually don't like, I'm not one who promote like really extreme cuts, but you know, I spoke to this lifter. I said, hey, you know, if you're gonna do this, regardless of my help, you're still gonna do it, right? And she said yes. And I said, if that is the case, you might as well just, if you're going through hell, might as well just bring somebody with you to share the pain. So I said that and we worked together. It was like harsh, right? It was like, first of all, you have to lose weight, right? Not only do you have to lose weight, but you kind of have to prepare for the worst case scenario because there's so much weight you have to lose. And for 52 kilo lifter, right? People think like, oh, you know, every lifter can cut 3 kilos, but that's not actually true because 3 kilos for a 52 kilo lifter is a larger percentage of their body weight, which means that someone who's cutting from 52 ideally should be around 54, right? If they really want to minimize the chances of them missing weight. And we've seen lifters where people be like, oh yeah, this lifter's going to do so well, and especially the lighter one, she just have to cut like 2.5 kilos. It's going to be an easy cut. And then this person doesn't make weight because 2.5 kilos is a huge percentage of their current body weight, right? 2.5 kilos might be super easy for 93 kilo lifter, right? For 120, you know, they can sleep one day, wake up the next day and lose 2.5 kilos. But for a 52 kilo lifter, like that is a huge percentage of the body weight. So she made weight, but that 6 weeks was tough, right? At the end of it, she said, I never ever want to do this again. And then in my heart, I was like, that is exactly the mindset that you should have. There will be two kinds of people. One would be like, I've done it, I'm going to do it again, you know? But I'm really glad that this lifter said that she won't do it again. So that is also kind of like, I feel like it's a coach's responsibility to kind of like discourage people from doing things that are like potentially harmful, right, in the long run. So that's like one of the crazy stories that I have. I mean, obviously
let me ask you about so if it's fast, if it's rapid weight loss, and we're not talking just water, I'm sure she had to cut water at the end as well, but you would have had to cut actual body size before the water in this particular case. If you're losing body size quickly, how much of it is, if it's slower over time, this is what I've been told previously. Is this a myth or is this real? If it's longer over time, a longer time period, you can lose more fat. But if it's quicker and you need it done quick, you're also going to lose a lot more muscle that way. And you worked hard to get that muscle. It's so hard to put on muscle mass. And so if you take your time with it, if someone comes to a nutrition coach without 4 months out and you need to lose some body fat, all right, you'll be able to retain more muscle. But if you need to do it within 6 weeks, guess what? I'm going to strip a lot of muscle you probably put on all summer and you're going to end up, and then we're going to cut water and then you'll probably be weaker. How much is that true, or how much of that is a factor? Or
yeah, 100%. I think that it really isn't like the time frame per se. All right. So we look at the body as, I mean, we're not machines, but I think like simplifying things, right? Making things, reducing things, like our body requires energy. Okay. And stripping away fat, stripping away muscle, while in a state of deficit, meaning you're eating less than you expand, is essentially providing the body with energy, right? So essentially, when you're stripping fat, you're breaking down the adipose tissues in your body, and creating an energy source for your body to tap into. However, right, the factor is not really whether, it's not about the time per se, because it depends on how much fat can your body release to provide enough energy for your body to function, right? So people who are leaner, right, the leaner you are, you release fat at a slower rate, right? And because of that, your body still requires energy. So you're either eating enough, you're either, let's just say you're trying to lose the same, like you're trying to burn X amount of energy, let's just say 500 calories, right? Just use this number, 500 calories a day. But if you're super lean and your body can only like liberate 200 calories from fat, right? So because that's the upper limit of the amount of fat that your body can release because you're so lean. that additional 300 calories of energy has to come somewhere. You don't. So it will probably come from muscle tissue because your body needs the energy. So it's gonna find the energy one way or the other, right? So that's why when you're in a deficit and if you don't have a lot of fat to lose, it will come from muscle, right? That is also why individuals who carry more fat tissue can lose more weight quicker, right? And they said like, oh, I'm losing weight while gaining muscle at the same time, right? That is usually how it happens. Is because they just have so much energy stored in their fat tissue and they can actually release it because they have so much that their body doesn't like hang back on it. Because if you think about it, like evolutionary wise, we are meant to store energy just because in the times of like survival or famine, right? So the less energy your body stores when in this form of fat, the more stingy it will be. It wants to keep it, right? But if you have more of it, it can be like, okay, cool. It's like if you have a lot of money in the bank, right? You'd be like more generous with it. But with like the cost of living and inflation not going up and you have no money, you'd be like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll stop buying my friend's meal, yeah. So
if
that's kind of like,
if you're like 190 pounds and you want to cut down to 180 pounds, if I did that super fast or if I did that slowly, as long as I start at the same body fat point, I'll probably lose the same amount of muscle mass, whether I do it quickly or over a longer period of time.
Theoretically, by theory, yes, but there's other factors as well that determines how much you where that mass would come from, right? So obviously, I think that if you eat more protein, you increases the chance of like sparing lean muscle. Okay. If you're resistance training, right, while you're in the deficit, you give your body a reason to hold on to muscle. You have to remember that people think like, oh, looking like being jacked is like the best thing ever. But man, if it's a zombie apocalypse, right? If it like honestly, during a zombie apocalypse, the jacked powerlifters would die first because we can't run. We can't do anything. We have all the muscle.
Small price to pay, bro.
We have all the muscle, right? And muscle like is just extra burden that our body doesn't really need from an evolutionary point of view. That's why we actually have to train to get muscle, right? We have to create an external stimulus for our muscle to grow, right? Just because, from that perspective, the evolutionary perspective, your body actually doesn't really need more muscle than it needs to support like daily like locomotion and movement. So there are a lot of factors, right? If you train during your deficit, you can likely hang on to muscle. But if let's say all things being equal, the person is similar amount of leanness, or let's just say we use you who you want to go from 6-pack Lapadat to 8-pack Lapadat, and if you do it within like 5 weeks versus like 5 months, right? The likelihood is that the 5 months would increase your chance of retaining muscle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, like it depends how lean you are, because like I'm assuming that you're really lean because you like to post like topless pictures of yourself sometimes.
Oh, stop it! You seen those?
And the pictures you send to me privately. So
that's privately. That's privately. All right. Well, anyways, but okay. So you would say then to do it slowly over time, and you'll be able to keep more muscle mass on that way.
Yeah, I mean, but we are also looking things from an isolated perspective, right? Like over time, that is assuming that you have all the time in the world, because powerlifters, we know when the competition is, which is why I always say I look at your weight where you are now, and I project, can you be at this weight to actually do a rapid cut like 6 weeks from now, right? And if I need you to lose quicker, we don't have a choice, right? I know you're a big like boxing MMA fan, right? A lot of the weight cutting research comes from like combat sports, right? So MMA, judo, boxing, and there's this very interesting like case study where one of the researchers from Liverpool John Moores University did, and what they did was they had to help this boxer make weight, right? Because like I don't know what level it is, because I'm not familiar with like boxing federations and all that. But they had to make him lose muscle because there was no way he was going to make weight because it was just too heavy. So what they did in his instance was actually like really have him have low amounts of protein so he will lose muscle. And if you think about boxing is very different from other like combat sports. And the research actually shows that a bigger cut tend to not affect boxing, because boxing is more skill based. It's a lot of striking. I mean, sure, if you can knock out the person, fine, but you still score points like landing blows, right? So that boxer made weight, he won, but the second time around, they actually had more time to plan ahead, and then they could actually spare his muscle while making weight. So it really does come down to how much time you have. And certain cases, like I said, we have to kind of like pull the plug we have to give, right? If you are just like stuck between a rock and a hard place, you just got to choose whether you want the rock or the hard place, So
yeah. Interesting, my man. So this is like long-term cutting going into a competition. And when working in terms of this, we'll get into the actual water cut. Let's kind of work on the timelines. So let's say we're still in the long-term ish. In terms like tracking for macros, because you have calories overall, where you could just straight up, we'll use a normal round number, 3,000 calories. And then there's actually tracking. All right, let's do protein, because you started touching on this a little bit, so it's a good segue. Protein, carbs, fats, and how important that might be for an athlete for performance in terms of training. And then and muscle retention, you kind of touched on that a little bit already, but even performance in terms of training. And then if also the micronutrients and how much that might be if you're further out. And then we could kind of skip to when we get into water loading, water cutting, and where, people talk about sodium and that kind of manipulation, like should you have carbs, should you not, fiber, stuff like that. So when it's just the training portions and you could, we're talking cutting, you could talk about just athletes in general as well. If it's not cutting during training portions, might need more protein, fiber, whatever the heck. Because there's also people who say the difference between sugar, like if it's a carb, it's a carb. Or is it? If sugars or vegetables, how much of a difference is it? And stuff like that. Like this is maybe when we're further out, and then we'll skip along closer to the competition, what these might change up.
Yeah. Obviously there's a lot to cover.
There's a lot there. I know. Yeah. Take your time, dog. Jump in wherever you want. We're going to move around in this pool together. We'll splash around.
So I think, going back to the whole like calorie equation, right? Is there a difference between, eating 3,000 calories of something versus looking at splitting up into different like macronutrient composition? I like to use this like heuristic, right? This mental heuristic where I just tell people that how much you eat, right? When I say how much you eat, I mean in terms of calorie consumption, right? And calories is just a measure of, we just use that as a measure of like energy, that you take into your body. How much you eat determines how much you lose, right? But what you eat determines whether you're losing or gain weight, what the journey would be like, So if you are in deficit and you're eating 3,000 calories worth of McDonald's, you still lose weight, right? But you may not perform as well during training. You may not perform as you may not feel as good in your day-to-day life. And a lot of nutrition, a big part of nutrition, as I mentioned at the start, is lifestyle habits. And if you don't feel good, right, every single day while you're cutting, there's a high probability where you would just be like, I'm gonna just call it quits. Obviously, if there's no competition, right, you can just call it quits, right? And if there's competition on the line, you may have to suck it up and tough it out. So at the end of the day, how the amount of calories you eat would determine whether you're gaining weight or losing weight, and what that calories are made from would determine how good you feel while losing or gaining weight. So that's kind of like the first thing I generally would tell people. And protein intake, the big thing with protein intake is that the obvious one is that it basically it's the building block for muscle, right? And it builds muscle. High amounts of protein spares muscle when you're trying to lose weight. So, and protein tends to be a little bit more filling compared to other macronutrients on its own, right? But most people don't really just eat protein by itself. People tend to eat food, right? So, and protein tend to have a higher like thermic effect of food. What I mean by thermic effect of food, it basically means that your body requires slightly more energy to digest that macronutrient compared to other macronutrients. I'm not saying that it's not like groundbreaking where it'll like be negative calories. There used to be the myth where people say like, if I eat celery, it's negative calories because the amount of energy my body takes to digest the celery is more than
is that
the celery itself. Yeah, I don't think you can eat anything that's like negative calories. So
damn it.
Yeah.
Probably a cheat code.
No. Unfortunately, there's not much hacking when it comes to nutrition. So that's for protein. Obviously, carbohydrate sources are.
Can I ask you one question real quick about protein?
Yep.
In terms of protein, is there? Maybe this is a myth as well. Is there a quick rule of thumb you could use in terms of the amount of protein you should have? Like, I think someone, in terms of, is there like percentage wise, you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, on average for an athlete, percentages to maintain muscle mass or whatever. Or is it like, I remember back in the day, they used to say something like 1.5 grams if like of your body weight or something like that, or I might be making that up, but I don't know. Is there any of those rules that we used to hear? Are any of them true, or is it all baloney and you just got to work with someone to find out?
So I think that question essentially goes back to your goal, So if your goal is to lose weight, it means that you're in a deficit. And if I go back to what I mentioned prior, if you're in a deficit, your body has to take energy from somewhere, whether that's from an outside source, whether you're eating or not, or from an inside source like your fat. So if you're not eating enough protein, what happens is that you increases the chances of your body stripping energy by breaking down muscle. So if that happens, you probably want to have high amounts of protein to spare that muscle. So if you're in a deficit, you probably want to have high amounts of protein, roughly 2.2 grams per kilo body weight, which is like 1 gram per pound, right? Yeah. And then up to like 2.5, 2.6. However, if you're in a state of like energy balance, which is like a maintenance phase, or you're in a surplus, by definition, your body shouldn't be breaking down body tissue because you're providing enough energy for your body not to break down tissue to get energy sources from elsewhere. In that case, you don't need as much protein. So when you're not trying to lose weight, you don't need as much protein as you are when you're trying to lose weight. And obviously, that the more weight you're trying to lose, the more weight you're trying to lose, which I assume that would create a bigger deficit, the more you want to probably skew towards the higher end of protein intake. So rough guidelines, 2.2 to 2.6 grams per kilo body weight if you're in a deficit. If you're not, anywhere from 1.2 grams to 1.8. And the reason why I also give like huge ranges is especially for, like I said, probably doesn't really matter as much when you are not trying to lose weight. But so why do you give such like a big range? Because one, like I said, eating is very habitual. Some people just like to eat more meat. Some people just like to eat more protein-rich food, And the second thing would obviously be things like if you're eating more protein, do you sacrifice other macronutrients? Because protein still has calories, right? So it has to, if you're eating way too much protein, you would have to eat less of something else. And could that something else be used for like helping you during your training, like carbohydrates, which we would talk about soon. Would you have to give way by eating less carbohydrates if you want to eat high amounts of protein?
And what about carbohydrates? Let's dive into that because, is a carb? Like if I get my carbs from a chocolate bar, or I get my carbs from vegetables, or I get, how, and in terms of timing wise as well, like I've also, you hear about carbohydrates will fuel you, you'll break them down quicker for your workouts and whatnot. And again, this is bro science. And it's the old school bro science, but it's still kicking around. So in terms of all that, what are your thoughts in terms of carbohydrates as a fuel? Is it a good pre-workout fuel? Macro timing for carbohydrates matter a lot. And even protein, actually, if we double back, if, again, bro science, you're supposed to have protein in that anabolic window. I don't know how much of that is actually real myth, or we're not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think we can like finish the protein conversation first. So in terms of like the anabolic window, so there are two things that sort of like creates the anabolic window, I guess. We don't really look at what essentially what the anabolic window means is that your rate of muscle protein synthesis would be sort of like maximized during that window. And the process of muscle building is when muscle protein synthesis exceeds muscle protein breakdown. So when you're fasting, throughout the night when you're not eating anything, your body tends to go in the state of muscle protein breakdown. And there are reasons why that's important as well. You don't want to entirely suppress muscle protein breakdown or protein breakdown in general, because like your body has to get rid of like the dead cells and all that kind of things, right? So it's just like a regulatory mechanism of how the body functions. But in terms of purely from a muscle point of view, right, you want to have a higher net muscle protein balance, which means muscle protein synthesis has to exceed muscle protein breakdown. And the anabolic window essentially said, okay, cool, this is when your body is the most sensitive towards protein. But one thing that really heightens that sensitivity towards protein is resistance training. So when you train, your body craves protein, right? And that window, right, is actually longer than what some people think. You can go up to 24 hours, sometimes even 48 hours, which means that, most people train back to back, right? So if you're training one day, if you train and that window is like open, and you train the next day, you would still trigger the window. Not to mention that when you eat prior, eat prior a meal, when you eat prior your training, you have a meal prior to your training, there are still amino acids in your bloodstream. So the only time I would say that you probably want to get protein in your body as quickly as possible is that if you train fasted, right? But then again, like there are reasons, performance-related reasons, not to train fasted as well. So I'm like, you probably don't want to train fasted anyway, right? So I would say that unless you're training fasted, maybe then you want to get protein as quickly as possible. Because if you think about it, when you get protein in, you are essentially switching muscle protein breakdown into the muscle protein synthesis muscle protein synthesis part, right? But if you're training fasted, it means that you are just extending the window of muscle protein breakdown because you're not having any protein in you. So that's probably when you want to get it in as quickly as you can. But other than that, I don't really think it matters. I think protein amount matters more than when you time it, right? If I had to pick one. But I also do think that it's also practical. There are also practical reasons. If people cannot eat enough protein, I would probably tell them that whenever you have a chance to eat protein, you probably should have them if you already have troubles meeting your goals. So I would just say, have it right after you train, because if you forget, then you're just not having enough protein, So that's like after you train, use training as a reminder that you need to eat protein, because maybe you spend 30 minutes in the car and you drive back from the gym and you're tired, and then be like, okay, cool, I lie on the couch and I forget to eat my protein, right? So there are also like practical elements on why I would recommend someone to have protein after their training, because it doesn't provide any harm, right? So, but I don't think that eating protein immediately after your training, especially if you already had a meal prior, would provide any significant gains compared to someone who delays it by like an hour, right? Or they decide to eat dinner when they go home instead of drinking a shake immediately after they finish their training session.
Okay. I don't know those. I can't relate to those people who forget to eat. I know people who say that to me. I work so much today, I even forgot to eat. I'm like, dog, that is always on my mind. I could use up all my calories by 5 p.m. But anyways, let's talk about some carbohydrates then. In terms of timing, what it does for us in terms of energy and the difference between different carbohydrates.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. I mean, when you just a little backtracking a little bit, the people that don't remember to eat when they work, like Durance, right? That was essentially Durance before we started working together, because it just works. He just tell me that, I wake up, I have something like a small breakfast, like maybe some oats and like an egg. Then I don't eat anything, and then before I train, I have a banana. Then I train, and then after training, I just eat like a pasta bake and I go to sleep. That's essentially what his eating used to be like, So yeah, that's an example. But nice segue, because Julian eats a banana before he train, right? That's like a carbohydrate source before training. So I think it goes in, segues nicely to the carbohydrate conversation. I think that to answer your initial question, is a carbohydrate in terms of energy, from an energy perspective, right? Yes, but remember, we don't just eat carbohydrates, right? When you eat like a vegetable, right, you get some carbohydrates, but you also get a host of other stuff, fiber, the vitamins, the micros with the vegetables. If you eat sugar, right, you get the carbohydrate and probably only the carbohydrate, right? Especially the more refined the sugar is. If you eat a potato, you get something else. So in terms of energy production, yes. But the question I think the larger question is that if you need to make a choice, how much of a composition should be purely carbohydrate versus carbohydrate plus something else, right? Carbohydrate plus all your other stuff. So just to frame it this way is that it is likely that if you're eating sugar or pure sugar, refined sugar, that it will be digested quicker, right? And therefore you get the carbohydrates in your bloodstream quicker. And if you eat a vegetable, right, there's an extreme where you have, it's like fiber, right? The body has to break it down before your body can actually obtain that carbohydrate. So in terms of, if you need a quick energy source quickly, you probably want to gravitate towards having the purest form of carbohydrate that you can. Whereas if it doesn't really matter, then you can have other sources, So going back to the conversation of having carbohydrate before you train, is just that, first of all, I need to put it out there. I think that powerlifters think that they need more carbohydrate than they actually do, right? That's the first thing. Probably because they might see like, they read some dietary guideline from a sports nutrition book where, this, like, someone needs around, like, athletes need 5 to like 9 grams of carbohydrate per kilo body weight or something like that, right? And they look at it and say, oh, this is me. But I'm like, those athletes that they talk about, first of all, some people get really upset if I say powerlifters are not real athletes. So I will not make that comment. But those athletes they talk about in those books the studies are largely based on endurance athletes. So that's the first thing to get out there. Powerlifters probably don't need as many carbohydrates as they think they do. And however, maximizing the carbohydrate intake closer towards training could potentially give you an edge. Because if I give you a choice, if you had to pick one, would you rather eat more carbohydrates before your training, or would you rather eat more after, right? And if you pick the one that says, okay, cool, I'm going to eat more carbohydrates before I train, that is likely going to help your training session compared to eating after, right? So in terms of that, most of the carbohydrate should surround your training window, right? So before you train, some carbohydrates after you train as well, to like replenish whatever carbohydrate stores has been lost, which is actually not that much, because resistance training, lifting weight, doesn't burn as much muscle glycogen is like essentially stored carbohydrates in your muscle, but you still want to replenish some of it, but most of it should come like prior, right? And the closer you are towards your training, the more of like a simple carbohydrate you want, something that rapidly digested and something that can be absorbed into your bloodstream as quickly as possible. Whereas, the further away you are, especially if you're cutting weight, I would say like you want to have something that's more complex, right? Something that has like other stuff attached to it, like, which essentially slows down the digestion process. Also due to the fact that it probably help you stay a little bit more full, right? Compared to eating something that's just like pure, like pure sugar. And during your training, right, especially if you have long training sessions with like high training volume, you probably don't want to be eating a celery stick or eating like a carrot, right? Even though there's some carbohydrates. First of all, it may look really weird in the gym, but if you just have like some candy, you probably get those like quick acting carbohydrates during your training, because that's when you need it. So it's always like on a per need basis. If you need it quick, you eat something that's like quickly or rapidly digestible in terms of getting the energy. But if you don't need it quick, then I would rather you have something that doesn't digest as quickly, primarily for satiety reasons, and also because those foods, they tend to have other like benefits, whether that's fiber, whether that's vitamins, and all of that other kind of stuff.
And how about fats? Again, this is like what you hear around gyms, bro science type of stuff, but how are fats, the benefits of fats, are fats linked to your hormones like people say? And so, I mean, we've heard everything about fats, everything from take out fats. Fat's been demonized, rely on carbs and rely on proteins. And then, sometimes people like, no, you need fats. Fats will actually, there's a great deal of benefit from fats as well. So what's the deal with fats? If you were to break it down in simple terms, and then we kind of work from how like athletes may approach it.
Yeah, I think that first of all, people need X amount of like certain amount of fats, but they don't need as much simply due to the fact that, I do think that unless you're below a certain threshold, also in a state of energy deficit, you probably could go by. And the reason why people would say, oh, let's cut out fat, is because fat is the most calorically dense. So for 1 gram of carbohydrate, you get 4 calories, right? So when I use calories, I mean, I look at it from the perspective of energy, right? So not just, oh, calories are bad, you don't want calories, right? And 1 gram of fat, you get 9 calories, right? So fat has double the amount of energy, more than double the energy of carbohydrates, which means that if you eat a lot of fat, your body would be in an energy surplus quicker than if you eat the same amount of carbohydrates. So if you want to be in an energy deficit, you probably want to reduce the one that has more energy content, right? Which is fat, right? So that's the reason why people say, oh, I cut out fat. Although like fat does play a role in like hormone regulation, certain like bodily functions. I think it's important as well. Like some like studies have shown that if you are in a energy deficit and you're having low carbohydrates and fat, because like in bodybuilders, they have basically just go to a point where they just have low everything, right? Then, it may impact like things like your libido, your testosterone level, But most powerlifters, I would say, would never reach that level, right? Of leanness where they have to be low fat, low carbohydrates, low calories. So I guess that's kind of like the primer on like how much fat matters for someone in powerlifting. And one other factor as well is that you have to remember is that most protein sources do contain fat, especially if it's animal products. So if you eat animal products, right, they tend to have fat that comes along with it, right? So that's something else to consider. If you have the fat limit so low, you might not even be able to hit your protein target by eating foods that you actually enjoy. So when I start with people, I like to not set their fat limit so low at the start, because at the start, let's just say if eating is something that's habitual as well. So people like certain types of food. And if you like beef, right, beef tend to be fattier, right? I'm not saying don't eat beef all the time, but I'm saying that there will be a point if you're not losing weight quickly enough, you have to drop your fat. That's probably when you have to swap out your fattier meats. But if I start that right from the get-go, might literally be eating chicken breast for like 10 weeks, in a row, right? When you don't need to, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I say that when you don't need to. I said you can still have the food that you enjoy, right? It's just that it comes to a point where you probably have to like swap things out if you're not hitting the targets that you have. So I think that's also something very important to consider, the practical implications of cutting out fat too quickly, too early, right? Because if your fat is really so low, right, where you can't reduce it anymore until, because after a certain level, it may just be not conducive for well-being. So if you start at that level, something else has to go, right? So I don't like to start fat too low right from the start. I like to gradually reduce it. It allows more room for flexibility of like food choices. And the thing is this as well, eggs, highly nutritious, like highly, but it has quite a high amount of fat compared to things like whey protein or chicken breast, right? And if you really set, if this person really like egg and beef, and you really set their fat target really low, they probably can't have both, or they can't have eggs, and they have to like make tough choices right at the start. And if you make it too difficult, at least this is what I noticed, if you make it too difficult for them at the start, it's going to be harder for them to stick to it, especially if there's more time, right? That they have to cut. But it goes back to the time frame again. If you if you only have like 6 weeks, you know, we just have to make that concession. So that's kind of like the practical element of fat intake, other than the fact that fat has the most calories, therefore you should cut it out. So
how do you feel about I mean, we'll get closer in the timeline to performance when it becomes water loading, manipulating sodium, etc., and then recomp afterwards. We'll go down the timeline, but before we get that far, while we're in this, we don't have to do a quick deep dive into it, but what are your thoughts on those drastic diets that you hear, like carnivore diet, straight up, all like vegetarian, etc.? Is it, obviously it's doable, keto, etc., but can those impact performance, or have you dove in too much into those, or not really super looked into those, or what are your thoughts? I know it's kind of a general topic and it might be too big a can of worms to super open up right now, but
yeah, in general, I think that I wouldn't completely remove a food group from someone, right? I just think that having different food sources provides different macros, micros, right? Things like this. And whenever you remove a big food group, you'll be lacking in one aspect of it. And I'm not saying that you cannot supplement it, right? For example, like vegans and vegetarians can have iron supplements, but if it's not an ethical choice, why do you have to? I don't see a strong justification to remove one food group completely. So I just don't see that, and I just don't see a reason to do it. Not to mention that some people might not be able to stick to it, right? And when it comes to nutrition, the thing that you can be consistent with would be the thing that will bring you the most benefit. So if someone really does enjoy like a keto diet, right? Whatever, carnivore diet, being a vegetarian, being a vegan, obviously if vegetarian, being a vegetarian and being a vegan is an ethical thing, like sure, we can find ways to work around it. But unless you have a strong enough reason, that probably has to supersede health, because I don't think it's healthy to completely eliminate a food group. Unless you have a reason that supersedes health, I probably would not. So that's just very, 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 very brief.
Would there be, and this is the child in me, cheat codes in terms of if you want all your carbs to come from sugar, delicious treats and snacks, and then you just like took vitamins and took like, could you do that? Is it going to be, it's still going to be difficult? Like you could theoretically be like, look at it. What if I take the vitamins of vegetables in a vitamin form? Can I still cheat code this away through? Or is it like,
Yeah, I mean, you probably could for a while, right? The question is like, people often like tell me like, oh yeah, sugar is addictive, right? Like, typical journalism, sugar is addictive, sugar is like a drug, right? I'm like, first of all, that's a lie, because you don't go around, when you walk around, you don't see people breaking into sugar production like factories and just like stealing sugar and just chucking them in their mouth, right? It's the combination of sugar and fat that usually and like other flavoring that makes like a food like tasty, So sugar on itself, like I never see anybody like just like chuck like table sugar in their mouth like that. So
it's also BS, because we naturally get hungry like that. Like to live, you have to eat. So your body produces like hormones make you hungry. So just because you get hungry doesn't mean you're quote unquote addicted to, because you like the taste of sugar. It just means you're hungry and have a preference towards sweets. But let's not pretend that's the same thing as like crack cocaine. To your point, it's like, you know what I mean? Where people are like, oh, I think sugar's got me addicted. Well, you're just hungry and prefer sweets because you're a man child like I am. Like you know what I mean? Like use a little bit of discipline here. Come on.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, first of all, like, I think that if you are eating sweets all the time, right? Personally, I think that there will be a threshold where you'll be like just completely sick of sweets. I do think that for a lot of people,
tested that theory. I've tested that theory.
So yeah, did you ever get sick of sweets?
No, sir. No, sir.
Yeah, so I do think that at the end of the day, right, you could probably like cheat code your way through it. But I would say that there are also certain things in terms of like glucose regulation, right? And if you eat mixed meals, right, you tend to like balance that out a little bit more, right? I'm not an expert in like glucose spikes and all that kind of stuff, right? But I would probably just say that you probably don't want like sharp spikes and dips all the time, right? So eating mixed meals tend to prevent that, right? Your body takes more time to digest. And the reason why we don't really have that sharp glucose spike all the time when we train is because when you're training, our body is primed to like absorb glucose, so you can kind of like prevent that sharp spike and dip. But if you're in a state of like rest, right, then you may actually have a higher spike and whatever other implications that comes with that, which I can't actually say because it's not my area of expertise. So yeah, that's in short, I would say that sometimes people have to grow up, eat your vegetables.
Dog, I'm Peter Pan, man. I eat my vegetables, but begrudgingly, man, begrudgingly. Okay, so let's get closer to the actual cutting phase in terms of like the water cut. This is where a lot of people fumble it, and they can do everything right for weeks. And it's heartbreaking. You see someone just smashing weights in training. Their body weight is close enough, a fair enough water cut, and the water cut can kill them. The water cut can change everything, and it can. I'm not sure if it's too much water, too little water. Playing around with the sodium, obviously can affect you as well. And then you also have recomp and how some people fumble it in terms of recomp and how the day can run longer than you anticipate. And you're not getting as much energy sources as you thought, especially after what you just went through. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, because that is honestly, some people can wrap their heads around eating enough through training, etc., and then just ruin it all at the end.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing would be to go back towards that threshold that we have. The closer you are towards the threshold you can cut from, the likelihood of it not impacting performance would be higher, right? So essentially the smaller you cut, the chances of it affecting your performance is low. Okay, but then people ask me, oh, why do you cut weight, right? So I also do think that now we probably have like some myth busting in our conversations. So the first myth that we said, that anabolic window thing. But the second myth, I think that I kind of like want to talk about is that people often think that weight gain simpliciter, right? Simpliciter meaning just weight gain by itself is going to make you strong. Like weight gain without factoring anything, all things being equal, right? But I don't think like I that's like not true, because what if you gain your weight all on your face? Like how's your weight gain on your face gonna make you stronger? Right? Tell me that, right? But
dude, then I was gonna say sometimes that's where I gain my weight. My head gets fatter. It's ridiculous. I don't know what's going on here, and it doesn't help my lifts, man. It don't help my lifts at all. But go on. Sorry, I digress.
Yeah, so
I thought that was a personal attack on me. I thought you scroll down my Instagram and see some 2015 era, and I'm like, dog, come on, man, I'm not ready for this. But go on.
I like to say like I need to look at you neck down, man.
That's right. You're professional. My eyes are up here, pal.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, if we like, there's that myth that, oh, I need to gain weight, right, to be strong. But like that's not a fact. The reason why people tend to stay at a higher body weight is so that they can eat more, right, to meet their training demands or their recovery demands. Okay. So if you have the chance to be heavier, it means that if you need food, you can eat without being afraid of not being able to make weight. Because weight only matters when it's a weight class sport, Like I coach.
Sorry, go ahead. I like just for clarification, like, so essentially what you're saying is like, we know if you're a weight class up, 10 pounds heavier, 15 pounds heavier, yes, there's a reason why there's weight classes, but we don't know if you gain 2 pounds and it's mostly in your, we'll say mostly in your head or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't know. We know those 2 pounds of extra water you have to cut are going to be shitty at the end, but we don't know if those extra 2 pounds helped. Maybe if you gain 10, sure, your weight class up. But when you're doing this game of let me get a little heavier, what you're trying to say is like, it might have not helped. Yes, mass moves mass in the big size terms, but while you're packing on a couple pounds here, a couple pounds there, you're making the weight cut harder, possibly needlessly, kind of deal. Maybe not,
yeah.
right? So yeah, right. Is that kind of
yeah? And the thing is that I'm not trying to like to call you out, but I don't know where the saying mass move mass come from, because like force move mass, right? Because if you have things that are like mass, like 2 rocks, and you put them apart, or just put the 2 rocks together, they're not gonna move when there's no external force. But like you have this, like there's so much mass in that rock, you know.
I think so mass moves mass. What they mean is like historically speaking, as you go up the weight classes, more weight is moved. So what's good for an 83 is nothing for a 120. You know what I mean? Like that. In terms of the larger the person, it tends to be they're lifting bigger weights.
Yeah, I mean, it probably goes down to muscle mass, right? Because muscle mass essentially contracts and produce force. But yeah, not so. But anyways, that's essentially that's essentially what I'm saying. You know, like if you're gaining weight for the sake of gaining weight, and it literally goes all to your face. If you have to lose that amount of weight, right, it's not going to help at all. So another crazy example that's probably more realistic is like people who have like breast augmentation, right? I'm not sure how heavy that weight is, right? But it has some weight, right? The thing, and the reason why I use that is because you're not going to cut weight from that. You're not going to lose weight from your breast augmentation, you know, but you still have to lose weight somehow.
So essentially, if someone puts on 5 pounds of fat, does that body fat, or let's not say 5 pounds, because maybe it's too small, but if someone puts on same amount of muscle mass, but they put on 50 pounds of fat, can they shift more weight?
I would probably say in the long run, if it affects leverages, if it helps your leverages, yes. But I think people often also think that, oh, you know, if I gain weight, it'll really help my leverages, right? But I don't think we know that. Some people actually feel worse when they gain weight, you know, like my leverages change for sure, but we can't always say that my leverages change for the better, right? And it's very lift individual. Like the clearest example is a deadlift. If you put on more fat on, it's likely that you won't be able to go into a good position to set up for your deadlift. That may impact your deadlift, right? So that's an example. I think the maybe there's sort of like a theory. I mean, not a theory, but the hypothesis is that it probably comes from equip powerlifting, where if you have more fat, you stretch the suit out more, right? So you have more like elastic energy. Right? I've never done equip powerlifting, so I might be just I might not be making sense at all, but you know, I think that could probably be a reason why people think, oh, as long as I put on weight.
There's also like for instance, if you took like Jesus Oliveras and stripped him of like, if you made him like ripped, but he had the same amount of muscle mass, but like probably being a heavier body, it would help him shift weights. This is I don't know the studies if this is true or not, but like, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I haven't. Again, this might be bro science, because you're right. Muscles make it move. But
so yeah, I think what helps is it could probably help in stability, right? So the larger you are, and you put you're probably more stable, right? So things that impacts like stability would be center of mass, right? Your weight, right? Surface area, right? So obviously, if you're larger, you have larger surface area, right? So I would say that it helps in stability, and this is also a reason why you do see that when people cut weight, right, or they go down a weight class, they don't really lose much strength from their deadlift, because if you think about it, when you're under a bar, when you squat, you have to stabilize the bar on your back, right? When you bench press, you have to stabilize the bar in your hands. But for a deadlift, you do not need to stabilize the bar, because the bar is on the floor when you start. You just need to maintain your position and exert force into the ground, right? So that's the reason why a lot of people do report, right? Or even when I go down a class, I don't really lose much strength from my deadlift. And I do think that stability plays a role. When we do like studies in the lab, we usually use strength as like some form of isometric strength, or like, meaning that you like contract against your muscle against like you're basically not like contracting. You're not going through an eccentric or concentric phase. You're like exerting force with like fixed object. So your limbs are not moving. And the reason why is that you want to eliminate other factors. You just want to see how much force the muscle can generate, right? So you take away the skill acquisition, the stabilizing element of it. So I do think that the larger you are, right, you probably are slightly more stable / balanced, especially in the squat and the bench, right? So that's
interesting. Kind of like, wow, it's true. That's interesting.
Yeah. So another theory that I have last time previously, and this probably justified my absolutely horrible squat, is that you I don't know whether this will make you like start looking at people's feet, but taller lifters with smaller feet, they tend to be worse squatters
because they can't stabilize and base out.
Yep. So like I'm like 5'10", 5'11", but my feet is like size 7, right? So like
you got child's feet, dog. I ain't saying that.
Yeah. So if I go around, like being sliding into people's Instagram DM saying show feet, I'm actually asking because I want to evaluate your squat, not because I have a feet fetish. Just putting it out there, So I'm like, I just want to see if
I'm doing
my theory is right. Yeah,
you're just sneaky style trying to set up a fake study right now. I'll be like, look, I'm doing a study, and if I happen to be in your DMs, but we'll see. We'll never see the results of this study. But yeah. So going back onto the we were talking about cutting. Where were we before we started diverging? I forget where we were right there. We're talking about like cutting in terms of body weight, like water, etc.
Yep. So yeah, basically saying that the myth of like being heavy itself is going to help you with performance.
That's right. That's right.
What I'm saying is that the ability to be heavy allows you to eat more, have a general sense of well-being. Because people often like to isolate eating as like, oh, I'm only eating for fuel. I'm only eating for function. But you have to remember that eating is part function, part pleasure as well, right? People eat when they're sad, right? People eat to sort of like compensate for the emotions. When people go out to social settings, they eat, they enjoy a nice meal together. It enhances the experience. So if someone is like having a bad day at work or just really stressful, if they have the opportunity to eat and like help them feel better, it's likely they're going to go into training feeling better and probably train better, besides all things being equal from the feeling perspective. However, if someone is feeling horrible and then they're hungry, but they already maxed out their food intake for the day.
Also, if during the training, they're continuously eating more calories, more energy, you're transferring energy into like where you're training, and then, you can see you're expending it. And then so there's like a temptation there as well. Like you're like germs, for instance, right? But yeah.
So yeah, I think that ability to eat is where the benefit comes, not from the weight gain per se. Obviously, if the weight gain comes from muscle, that's a different question, right? So moving forward to that, it's like, okay, cool. What should we do with the cut? So I said, if you often overestimate how much you can lose, that's going to be a problem, right? I'm not saying that there isn't ways to make weight. For example, our boy Gavin, right? We had to sit in the sauna right before Sheffield, right? Still made weight. Obviously not ideal, right? There are ways to probably do it better, right? And that is, I would say that that's one of the biggest factors when you kind of like make that may impact cutting. It's just that you're just cutting too much, right? And the second part obviously would be after your cut is done, is that what are you going to do, right? How are you going to rehydrate? How are you going to refuel? What is the important thing to do? And this is, I think, where most people mess up would be this portion. And next myth for you is that people need to eat immediately after they weigh in. I think that's a huge myth. I think that eating immediately after weigh-ins is super overrated, right? Like, especially for 2-hour weigh-ins. I'm talking about 2-hour weigh-ins because often, like I said, this cutting phenomenon come from combat sports, and you see like after like I don't know, Israel Adesanya or whoever weighs in, they just like eat a lot of food. But dude, they have 24 hours, right? They're gonna digest the food before they fight. But for powerlifter in a 2-hour weigh-in, like I said, you mentioned, if you eat, you might still have that piece of food in the stomach, right? By the time the banquet hits, So I do think that eating immediately after weigh-ins, huge myth, super overrated. really a clear example would be, like, I use Durins again, because Durins just doesn't like to eat, you know. That guy doesn't like food. He's like a little bit strange that way. And I tell him this to his face, so I don't have to be bad talking about it. But the man doesn't like to eat, right? So even it is in his nature not to eat even after weigh-ins, right? And he said, I just, you know, maybe I just have a banana and then I just hydrate throughout the whole time. And it feels great, right? I mean, clearly he performed 820.5, right? And that was like fantastic. Total 800 prior, you know, that was great, you know. And what people should really focus on is the hydration, right? Most people performing some form of dehydration method, such as either through a water loading and a water cut, so essentially expelling water from your body, right? Or through some form of like heat exposure, right? So sauna, or maybe like any form of sweating, like what you're losing is water, right? And that is what you want to put back in. And the reason why I say eating is overrated is that eating only matters when you deplete your carbohydrate stores. And combat fighters, they often deplete their muscle glycogen, right, inside their muscle by exercising, right? They go on a bike. So for example, if you cycle at roughly for 90 minutes, okay, at roughly 70 to 75% of your max heart rate for 90 minutes, you deplete your muscle glycogen by around 50%. If you tell that to a powerlifter, they might not even make it past the 30 minutes mark, right? So you're not going to deplete the muscle glycogen in your body during your taper week. It probably means that you have enough fuel in your muscle to perform, right?
What about like calories just for the day to like, or like if you eat food, how quickly do you turn it into calories that day that you'll need fuel for the day?
So yeah, like how things are is that when we eat, primarily we look at carbohydrate, right? So your body only, in most cases, absorbs 60 grams per hour. So 1 gram per 1 gram per minute, right, of carbohydrates. If it's from a single carbohydrate source, right? From like single carbohydrate source. But if you consume only glucose, you absorb 1 gram of carbohydrate per minute. So 60 grams per hour. But if you consume a mixed carbohydrate source, which is glucose plus fructose, which is like basically fruit sugar, right? You can increase that to 90 grams per hour, right?
That's not much at all, though. Holy smokes. Now I see what you mean in terms of it's not as much as people think.
Yep. And the thing is this, right? If you cannot absorb it that quickly, it's just going to be sitting in your gut. And it might cause you some stomach upset. And the last thing you want to do is either throw up or poop your pants while you're trying to squat because you're just bracing so hard, right? So, you know, we've seen people throw up at Worlds before, right? So I'm not saying that that's purely attributed to high amounts of food consumption, but the fact of the matter is that if you have more food in your stomach that cannot be digested, right, it's just going to sit in your stomach. And if you think about it from this perspective, you're already probably going to rehydrate with some form of electrolyte sports drink. And those stuff have carbohydrate, you know, so that it's probably more than sufficient, right? What you're having. My advice for people is just that, you know, if you do want to eat because you're hungry, right? And people are usually hungry after, especially if they have to like wait for a bit after their weight cutting. You just have carbohydrates that are easily digestible, right? You don't want to have anything too complex. And you eat just to stay full. But if you're cutting right, all right, and you're rehydrating right, you should not feel so hungry because you are just bloated and like filled with water. For example, Gavin, right, at Sheffield, after that huge cut that we did, right, and the sauna, he was like, man, like, I'm like stuffed. I'm so much water. I was like, but like, I look at him, I was like, Gavin, you got to drink this. You got to drink it down. You got to, you know, finish this fluids that I made for you. I mean, I gave him specific instructions on what to do, but he was like, oh, I can't. Like I said, you got to finish it, you know. And you know, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I mean, even I think if you compare everybody in Sheffield, he probably is the youngest lifter there. So he might be the baby out of everyone. A baby with a beard. So
a baby with a beard.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that completely like was the reason of why he didn't feel any performance impact during his lifting at Sheffield. But I would probably say that if I were to bet on something, that I would probably bet on that rather than something else, like eating something. Because at the end of the day, the food's not going to be digested, you know, and your body needs the water, especially if you're losing water. The thing is this: if you're not losing as much water, right? If you're just doing a gut cut or you're just like doing an overnight fast, or whatever, you probably don't need to be as aggressive with water. But if you look at it from this perspective as well, what is the harm, right? It can either be neutral or positive, right? Because there's probably no harm, but at the end of the day, I would probably place my money on like interventions or recommendations that is possibly neutral to might bring a positive impact. So I would say in most cases, focus on hydration. Hydration matters the most. Eating during immediately after weigh-ins for 2-hour weigh-ins, super overrated, probably a myth. And yeah, that's probably what I would say in terms of the rehydration and refueling part.
What about the sodium manipulation? And some people, and also we've seen people have drastic cramping involved with some of these water cuts. Recently, Bryce Lewis was suffering from really bad cramping at PA Nats, but Michael C. back in the 2019 Battle of the 74s he had an amazing lead in squats and bench, and then come deadlifts, crazy cramping. I mean, these are just a couple off the top of my head, but this is very common to suffer from cramping. Maybe there's nothing around. Maybe you can't do much about it if you're still maybe did they just not drink enough? Could it have been sodium manipulation? I know not them specifically because you don't know exactly what they did, but can you take in too much sodium afterwards trying to overcompensate? How do you feel about cutting out sodium leading up to the weigh-in? And then how much do you take in sodium afterwards? People taking in electrolytes, etc. Because I don't know if this is part of your area expertise, if we're going beyond that, but you let me know if because we're talking about a lot here. And this is the thing with nutrition where people think like, oh, someone's a nutritionist, they know everything about everything. It's like, this is such a vast, usually you specialize in certain areas. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, this is not as bad, right? People ask me for relationship advice when I'm the nutrition coach. So they literally think you know about everything.
That's right.
But yeah, I think sodiums and cramps are like really interesting. So I think we can talk a little bit about cramps first, just to set the stage. Eric Helms, obviously, you had him on podcast. Great person. He forced me to say that because he's my PhD supervisor. So, but Eric and I, we talk about this a lot, right? And Eric and I had a conversation about about Bryce, right? After PA Nats, and Eric asked me what do I think. So I said like, oh, there may be other factors. And if you ask Eric would probably agree as well that until today, right, we cannot pinpoint the exact mechanisms on what causes cramps, right? I said that scientists knows like anything about like this, like quantum physics, black holes, and the universe, but can't tell you how cramps happen.
Is that right? Holy smokes! It's so humbling because we think we know so much about the human body, and yet something as simple as cramps is very difficult for us to know. And we talk like we do. We're like, eat a banana. It's a matter of
you. That I think that there are like working hypothesis on how it may impacting, and the current most popular working hypothesis is that it's like muscle excitation, that essentially your muscle gets excited and it contracts and you can't release it, right? So that's essentially how cramping would be. So in terms of the conversation that I had with Eric, we maybe attribute it to maybe some people just can't cut as much, right? When I say can't cut as much, I don't mean they can't physically lose weight. It's just that their body just doesn't do well when they lose as much weight, right? So that's one. In terms of that's setting the stage for cramps. But for sodium, right? I think sodium. Why people consume sodium, besides the fact that if you're like me and you like an Asian diet, you probably like really salty food. But other than that, is that sodium helps retain like water, right? Like water retention. And the clearest thing is this: like I said, if you're not like me, where you consume high amounts of sodium on a daily basis, if you go out and eat like Asian fried rice takeaway, right? The next day, step on the scale, your weight's going to be high. It's not because that fried rice is heavy, right? It's just that your body just retained much more water. And if we look at that, kind of like feeds into the thought, oh, can I trick my body into actually retaining more water? And then when I water cut, right, it release all of it, right, through sodium loading. And the fact of the matter is that the only study that we have really looked at so far by Real and colleagues, right, done I think like 2017 or 2018, the mechanisms for water loading and water cutting, they're not like clearly laid out, right? So they say that, okay, cool, it may upregulate certain things, right? Therefore, this is what causes it. So if we cannot even identify the mechanisms of just a regular water loading, now to try to add another layer of complexity saying that this will work, I think is quite like hubristic. It's like you're making large claims that people like you cannot back up with no data to back up. And the fact of the matter is that sodium is just so tightly regulated in our body, right? Because it is really important. Like high amounts of sodium literally can cause like high blood pressure, and people can have like health consequences from it, which means that our body really tightly regulates the amount of like sodium in our body. So to think that we can consume X amount and trick our body into providing us the benefit of a water load without actually impacting our health or general well-being, I think that that's like quite a stretch. So I personally, and I've not seen any data that has shown otherwise, and I've spoken to other powerlifting nutritionists as well, and they would say that sodium manipulation is a stretch when it comes to using it as a cutting method, right? When I say sodium manipulation, I mean a sodium load. What I'll do in terms of sodium manipulation is that the last 2 days, I'll probably just get them to remove all sodium from the diet just to make sure that they're not retaining to more water. But I don't think increasing the amount of sodium allows you to cut more weight by losing more water. But there's only one small case, right, that I would actually ask someone to eat more sodium, and that is if they do not have sodium in their diet. People like Jurins who don't like food if they don't put seasoning because they don't like flavor, or I know people who literally don't salt their food at all. And if they have to do a water load, right, they might go into like water toxicity, right? So like there's too much fluids in their body, but not enough sodium, right? So and it just dilutes the ratio in their body, and then they may go into hyponatremia, right? Too much water. So in that case, I'll just say, okay, cool, put certain amount of sodium, right, to balance out the amount of water you're drinking. So that would essentially bring you to like a regular human baseline. So that is the only instance that I would ask somebody to add sodium. But when I say add sodium, I also say add to a reasonable amount, not like you're gonna have like half a bottle, half a like table salt, half a tub or whatever like of like table salt to like so that you can lose more weight. So I don't think that using sodium as a means to lose more water weight has any strong backing, right, behind it. But there may be certain cases but very, very rare cases where I would say, okay, cool, have some sodium in your diet before. But definitely towards the end, I would just roughly around 2 days prior, I'll cut out sodium. And that is just to ensure that they're not retaining water during the last 2 days so they can get rid of it.
When you say cut out sodium, just to be clear, like, are you going down to like, I mean, you'll never get to like zero. You're going to intake it somewhere, but like you just try to get as close as you can to zero? Or
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So I do it very practically, right? Because I coach a lot of people. Obviously, if I'm there to monitor them, I can like make it a little bit more fine-tuned. But I usually say these 3 things. If you eat food, eat something with a label, try to have the sodium amount as low as possible. Don't salt your food and don't eat out, right? So these are the 3 things, the practical steps I give for someone to actually reduce their sodium intake on the last 2 days before their weigh-ins. So that's generally what I say.
Is there any kind of like concerns of not having sodium for 2 days? Like, is there, or not really? Like, you could go 2 days without sodium and be fine.
Yeah, I honestly think that you can be fine with 2 days without sodium. So I think that there's like an adjustment period, right? So like if you have regular sodium intake, usually like the last 2 days is probably when if you start to, I would probably say that at the tail end of the 2 days is when you will start feeling the impact. But my general water loading and water cutting protocol is also like the last. So if you have 2 days that you have low to no sodium, the first of so 2 days out, you will have the highest amount of water with the lowest amount of sodium, right? And then the last 1 day out is when you cut water, right? So your water intake won't be as high, but you have a low amount of sodium. So I think that based on what I've done so far, like 1 day of high water intake with almost no sodium probably wouldn't impact things because the previous 3 days you're still having some form of sodium, so it's not like things will like plummet and you like feel absolutely horrible. But everybody responds differently, which is why I asked them, how do they feel? If they feel great, most people, so far I haven't had problems, but most people, they feel okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that and I've never felt any different at all. Like I'll cut out the sodium, and I've had people be like, oh my God, that's so, like people who don't know. And they're like, that's so dangerous. 0 sodium. And I'll literally do only things I could track by label. So it'll be 0. And then I'll be like, man, I felt no different. Now, again, like you said, I was around 2 days. Like I'm sure if I went weeks without, so I never put sodium in my body ever again, there'd be issues. But like 2 days, I literally could not have told the difference. What about afterwards? We'll stay on sodium for a second, then we'll talk about like the water and how much water, how much is too little, too much, or whatever, if there's such thing as too much. And then the day of. But sodium after you weigh in, then is it important to try to get like the electrolytes back in the body, and that how much electrolytes, is there too much to put it back in the body, or is there any worry there? Or?
Yeah, so I think that, when we look at electrolytes, the two main ones we really talk about is sodium and potassium. So remember, the role of sodium is to retain water in your body, right? Research actually shown that, sodium does retain water in your body. Potassium probably doesn't do much. But what potassium does is that potassium balances out sodium, right? So if you have high amounts of sodium and like really low potassium, then like that is when people have issues with like blood pressure, because it's not balanced, right? That's why people say like, oh, eating a salty diet or high in sodium it isn't really harmful as long as you can have enough potassium to kind of like balance it. So that that thought process kind of like applies here as well. You probably want a good amount of sodium to potassium ratio, right? And the general guideline I usually give is 1 gram of sodium per liter of water, right? And then the ratio of that would be 3 to 1. So roughly like 1 gram for every 300 grams. So for every 3 grams of sodium, you have 1 gram of potassium. So that's generally the ratio I give. And most people don't actually have to count it, because I would say that if you buy like a Gatorade powder or like a Powerade powder, it's already very close to that. So I generally recommend people just buy that because you don't have to do it. Takes out the guesswork for you, right? So that's generally what I recommend. You go by amounts of fluids, because at the end of the day, you think about it, sodium itself is not going to do anything, because sodium has to be consumed or evaluated in terms of the amount of fluids you're consuming, right? So that's why I use per liter. So that's kind of like how I recommend it. And in terms of how much water or how much fluid someone should put back, what you want to do is you definitely want to put back the amount of water you lose, right? So how much water you lose is dependent on the method. Generally, I would tell people, I want you to, because I can't say that, oh, if you lose 3 kilos and you perform a gut cut, right? I can't say that, 2 kilos come from water, 1 kilo come from gut weight. I would never know the exact ratio, but I generally tell people that the amount of weight you lose, right? You in kilos, you put back that weight in liters of fluids. So if you lose 2 kilos, right? Regardless if that comes from a gut cut if that comes from a combination of a gut cut and water loading and water cutting or some sweating, you want to put back roughly 2 liters of fluids back into you. That's my general guideline. And I think that's like playing it safe. In combat sports, they actually do recommend slightly higher, like 150%. But
they're sweating in their sport though, so that's different too. Like we don't sweat much in powerlifting, so they're probably overcompensating, thinking, look, at today you're going to lose it all over again, right? Like it's so.
Yeah, like combat sports is like very, very, very different. And I also feel like you said, they probably can drink more, eat more, because they have more time to digest it anyway. We have like X amount of time. And I think that once you hit that amount, all right, the thing is this, you're performing 2 methods, okay? A gut cut, you're losing some weight from that.
What's a gut cut? Sorry, because you've referenced that a few times.
So essentially what you're doing is you're reducing fiber and reducing food volume. So when we eat, for example, when we go to sleep and we go to the toilet the next day, we're not actually getting rid of everything that we consume. There's still some residual fiber. You're not going to get everything out in one go. So by reducing fiber and food volume across like roughly 3 to 4 days, you actually basically clear your stomach essentially, right? You're clearing your stomach of like residual food weight. So you're not having that much food in you when you weigh in. So if you're using that gut cut, right? Let's just say you get and a water loading protocol, right? You're consuming the amount that you lose, the absolute amount. You're already technically putting more water in your system than you lost, because some of that weight that you put back in water actually comes from that gut cut. So I would say that the amount of weight you lose in kilos, consume that in liters, and you should probably be fine.
Okay, that's a pretty good. And in terms of meats and stuff, I don't know if this is again area like you've seen much in terms of research on this, but like, how long does it take for someone to digest meat? Red meat maybe a little longer than white meat. I don't know if this is something that you're familiar with either, but is it something where if you start getting close to performance time, you got to start thinking about these kind of things?
Yeah, I guess I never looked into it because it never really is. It has never really played a role in terms of rehydration and refueling. So I just tell people you don't even need to consume any protein after your weigh-in. Like, why would you want to eat meat? All right, like it's not gonna do anything for your performance. It's probably just gonna make you feel like sit in your stomach, So at the end of the day, the thing as well, after people go through like some form of gut cutting and manipulation, some of them have like their stomach get a little bit more sensitive, So eating something that big might actually not sit well with them. So I do think that you want to minimize the chances of any of that happening, right? So I've just said, hydrate. You want to eat. People ask me what are my go-to meals if I do need to eat. I just say like bread and honey, Like obviously if you're gluten intolerant, then you can't have like regular white bread, right? So I just like bread and honey, just have those. Like it's easily digestible. I like honey because you can just like suck it out from a bottle, and it's
crazy. Even back in the day, I remember people bringing in like honey, and I just mimicked, and I wasn't sure if that was like we were way off base or not, but literally just bring a little thing of honey and squirt it in their mouth every now and then rock and roll, and that was all you had. And I guess it was. I guess somebody who started that trend actually got it from somewhere that was real.
Yeah.
So sometimes we hit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you just want to eat the most simple things, like really, really have like simple foods that will sit well in your stomach. Like the last thing you want to do is eat something that is like completely different, right? So at the end of the day, that's really, really important. Eating itself is really so like overrated. So now you want to eat something that's like completely different, probably wouldn't help. I don't think that's like a rational decision to make when you're trying to maximize performance. Oh, one more thing that I tell my lifters, and I emphasize this a lot, is that until you finish your last deadlift, whatever you put in your body is for performance, not pleasure. Because people be like, oh, I've been cutting so hard, I've been dieting, I had to eat like really bland food the last couple of days, I had to do a gut cut. Now I'm just gonna eat eat a pizza or something, because I'm like trying to compensate for everything I miss out. But I tell my lifters, until you put down your last deadlift, everything you put in your body is for performance, not pleasure. So I emphasize that time and time again to them, because I think that's like really important.
Some people, right after they weigh in, they're eating all the food they couldn't eat. And true, you weighed in, so you technically have made weight, but also true, the show has to start now. Right? There's the actual performance part. And I mean, some people can eat and maybe they're used to eating pizza and still lifting and be fine. Okay. But if that's not you, and most people can't, if you're fairly trim, you're not eating pizza every day before you work out. They could be like, no, I eat pizza all the time. You look at them and they're pretty jacked. It's like, you eat pizza every day? How much pizza? Let's not get too crazy here. But yeah, actually you would know. They couldn't lie to you. You're the one telling them what to eat. To be like, no, you don't. You don't eat pizza every day. But yeah, that's true. That's definitely something that people go hog wild on. Wait for the banquet. Wait for that night. You could eat whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, I'm excited for Malta's banquet, man. Like,
dude, I'm trying to be as disciplined as possible right up until the banquet. because it's Malta. It's going to be beautiful weather. It's in the middle of the summer. You know, people are going to be going on excursions. The shirt's coming off, man, and I'm not getting caught slipping in. I might even have to hire you just for commentating, man. We're going to be manipulating water and salt. I need to manipulate my salt the whole nine, man. We're going all in. We'll talk in the DMs. Let me ask you about. Do you know much about like metabolism in terms of? Again, this is slightly off topic, but still on. Is it what in terms of, you hear about slowdown of metabolism? You have people, you probably have dealt with lifters of different ages, from what, like juniors to through their 20s, through hitting 30, through hitting 40, etc. Do we know much in terms of studies on metabolism and how much it slows? Or, I mean, I don't know if you even need to dive into it for what you do. But have you read much on this? Because I've heard, it doesn't slow as much as we thought it did if you retain a certain amount of muscle mass or something along those lines. But I haven't read those studies myself.
Yeah, I mean, like at heart, I'm a nerd, right? So I'm a nerd who like to lift weights. So yeah, I think metabolism is super fascinating because you hear like people say stuff all the time in the gym. I used to work in the gym, right? I used to coach people, and then people even say, like, oh yeah, my metabolism slow down once you hit 30. I'm like, the facts that people will say, oh, wait till you hit 30 or wait till you hit this age. And everybody, the age that someone's metabolism slow down so happens to be customized towards the age that they start gaining weight. So it's not really that we're at 30 or not. If you start gaining weight at 28, you'll be like, oh, my metabolism has slowed down, So like that's usually what gets thrown out. But that's this really interesting study, right? Like this was all the big waves in like the scientific community by like a study by Herman Ponzer in like 2021, where they looked at basically metabolism, and it's like really like a huge study because what they did was they kind of like used the gold standard of measuring like energy expenditure called like doubly labeled water, right? And it's like this huge database of basically anybody they put in like that use doubly labeled water to measure energy expenditure. And what they found was that upon birth all the way up to your 20, your metabolism increases, right? And then when you're 20 all the way to 60, right, your metabolism remains relatively similar, and then from 60 onwards, there's some slight there's a slight decline there. So yeah, I think you're right when you say like the metabolism doesn't really slow down as much as people think when they age. So aging, like when you account for age, it happens only when you're 60. When you account for like biological sex differences, if you regulate for muscle mass, right, no difference. Right. So these are the two things
really? That okay.
Yeah. So those are the two things that that stuck out. And I think that, if you think about it, why do I think at the heart of the matter is understanding why people say, oh, my metabolism slow down at this age. And most of the time, if you look at that, those are the age where people have like, it's probably the peak of their careers. They probably start exercising less. They go to the gym less. They stop moving less because they have children. They're more sedentary, right? And that energy expenditure from their like day-to-day activities, right? Their need, right? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, right? Goes down, right? So that is when their energy expenditure from all those activities they will probably do when they're younger, right, starts to drop. And then if they're still eating the same amount, right, then they probably gain weight, and that is also assuming that they eat the same amount, because once you have a family and all that, you probably won't be able to like eat the things that you want. Like a lot of the lifters, some of the lifters that I coach in the masters, they would say, oh, I have to go out with my family, bring my family out for food, right? And all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, fine, go ahead. Please do that. Don't I'm not going to ask you to chase your expensive hobby when you're a M1 lifter, right? And at the expense of your family, So, I mean, I don't say that because I'm not supposed to give people like family advice, but in my head, I'm like, you should be enjoying time with your family and enjoying food that you eat. So that is usually the thing that actually happens that paints the illusion that metabolism slows down. And yeah, so I would probably say that unless you're 60 years old, don't tell me that your metabolism's like slowing down.
Oh yeah, I've seen like posts like people that I went to high school with, and they'll post and be like, my metabolism isn't what it used to be, and it's like same thing what you're saying. And I'm like, homie, I'm the same age as you, man. what are you talking about? I'm not special. Like, just whatever. I got the same lifestyles I did back in the day, but it's still like, I don't know, man. Are you sure about this? That your metabolism slowed down? It's all out of your control. Essentially, is what kind of to your point, what people want to say is like, this is out of my control. It's got nothing to do with discipline. I just, it just happened to me. It's like, well, maybe not. It is what it is. Is there, what about, hold on a sec, because I remember I just want to take a look at some of my notes here. I want to make sure I haven't, as we roll through, and we've done a really good job of, and talked about like exercise, nutrition, sleep and nutrition, but a lot of that is not necessarily linked directly towards cutting, but kind of during the normal training cycles. Like, how much of it do you think people benefit? Because you were saying when we first kicked it off, and you're saying like, you should come to me a little early, and especially like if you're cutting, and then I can help you cut and it'll be an easier cut. We talked about possible muscle retention, etc. Like if it's not drastic and whatnot, but how much do you think people could get out of having a nutritionist if you're not cutting? If it's like, look, I just want to know, like just through athletic performance, knowing and having appropriate macro, appropriate micronutrients, having all this laid out, having the appropriate amounts of fiber, and how fiber, again, I don't know if you heard Lane Norton when he's on Andrew Huberman, but they were kind of talking about the role of things like fiber and the role of things like certain things like this where people just don't know. They don't necessarily, most of us don't. And not like I'm an expert by any means, but at the very least, I'll know my fats, proteins, and carbs, and I know I got to get my fiber in. But there's a lot of people in powerlifting are relatively flying blind, and as long as their athletic performance is up there, cool. But how much of a benefit would it be to have a nutritionist all year round, even if you're not cutting?
Yeah, so that's actually a super good question, right? So you have those, like, I think nutrition coaching, it really is picking up steam a lot. And a lot of the lifters, when they first come to me in the initial years, would be like, okay, cool, I need to cut weight, I need to make weight, help me, right? But now I start having some lifters of like, are you sure you want nutrition coaching? Like, I mean, in my head, I'm asking that question because like your goal is to gain weight. Are you sure, right? Because I'm always the kind, I'm the coach where like, if I don't want to impose unnecessary cost on you, I probably wouldn't, So for example, I think the biggest example so far was Heather Connor, right? That first came to me after South Africa, because like she is perpetually 47. She'll never ever go to 52. Let's just put it this way, right? She is nowhere close to maximizing out her weight class. But we always know that Heather always competes light, right? So for her, I needed to help her eat well. And at the back of her head, she said that, yeah, sometimes I have fear of eating too much, right? And I don't know what will happen. Will my weight spiral out of control? So I think having a nutritionist, a nutrition coach that will provide assurance, one, that provides a huge help, okay? Second would be obviously endurance, using another example. Doesn't eat well. That's why it's not gaining weight. So, but obviously when he wants to gain weight, I would say, let's eat properly. The best thing you can do is that if you're already eating well and you're not gaining weight, is eat more of what you're already doing, right? I usually say that, but there's some people that would never ever gain, like really struggle to gain weight, right? And people say, oh, why? Then there are people actually, like when we talk about metabolism, there are like, like genes matter as well. So like there are people who are like, we call them like thrifty phenotype and spendthrift phenotype. So like this phenotype basically said there are people who actually can eat more, right, and not gain weight. Whereas there are some where I eat, like I just look at the pizza from the Instagram ad and I put on weight. There are those, and those are like largely determined by genes. And I have coached lifters who probably have like a spendthrift phenotype, so they don't really put on weight as quickly. So I need to find strategies, right, for them to be able to sustain some form of eating pattern that allows them to gain weight. And those lifters I work with, I'm like, okay, cool. they are perpetually like this lifter that I work with, he's like stuck at 90 kilos. So obviously 90 kilos is too much to go to 83, but it's like way under 93. And he's tall, which means that it's probably a bad idea to go down to the 83 kilos anyway. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's find ways. And if you look at it, he's the kind of, I think that when you look at like spendthrift lifter, like spendthrift and thrifty phenotypes, real world example is that there are two kinds of people, I would say. Those that if they just eat habitually, they'll lose weight, and those that eat habitually, that will gain weight, right? So there are these two kinds. So another example would be Emil Krastev. He's the kind where he just loses weight really easily. Like he eats like 3,500 calories and starts losing weight, that kind. So for him to maintain a certain weight, I would say you need to eat more. And I need to say these are the strategies. Yeah. So I said that these are the strategies that I want you to employ to eat more. And I also want you to eat well, right? So for example, I said like, okay, if we're going to increase your carbohydrate amount, let's try to have at least like 30 grams, which is like roughly a piece of fruit. Like get a piece of fruit a day, So at least you're not eating a whole bunch of like empty sugar, right? Because at the end of the day, if I can get you the most bang for your buck in terms of what you eat, I would do it, right? So it's more about finding strategies that, one, sustainable over time. Second, because like I say, it has to be sustainable over time, because those people who are trying to gain weight and struggle to gain weight is that if they resort to their old habits, they'll just lose weight or not gain weight. So it has to be, they have to eat well over time. And we know that muscle mass actually is much slower. So it has to be more gradual, right? Then the second thing will be trying to find a nice balance of not just eating junk all the time. There would be times when I have to resort to them getting more food from junk. For example, that lifter that I was talking about prior to mentioning Emil Krastev, the guy who's 90 kilos, he works a lot, right? And he's always on, he has like an active job, which probably also doesn't help that he's not gaining weight. So sometimes I say like, man, you just have to get a pizza in, man, because your calories of the day is just so low because you're so busy that day. I say if you're busy, take a frozen pizza from a freezer, pop it in your oven. Sometimes that's just what you need. Because at the end of the day, I'm saying that is not ideal. But then again, your life circumstance and your work circumstance isn't ideal anyway. So we just have to make the most out of it, right? But it is all about like creating opportunities. And I think the next thing I like to talk about would be looking at experimentation, right? So I have this lifter who is trying to gain weight. So he's kind of like under he hasn't maxed out his weight class. He competes in the 105, but he's roughly 100 kilos, 101, right? And I said, we have time, right? And because of like certain federations, they don't require you to compete in the weight class that you plan to compete nationals at. So as long as you're within a certain range. So if you're like within 2%, you can compete as like maybe as a 107, right? You compete as a 120, but you still can qualify for nationals. So his federation is like that. So I said, like, why don't we just push you as high as you can, and then we still perform a cut. So we look at this is the threshold that you can cut from and make weight. So if we cut you from, let's just say 108 or 109, and if you're like 104.5, because technically you're supposed to compete in 120, you just drink water and eat, and so you weigh in 105.2. So you compete in the weight class, the correct weight class. But if you don't make it, right? For example, if you don't make it, we know that this is the maximum amount of weight we can cut using this method. And then that basically allows me to experiment a lot. And I enjoy a lot of that kind of sessions because, like I say, I'm a nerd at heart, right? So I'm like essentially experimenting with different protocols on different people. And I just said, this is information we can use for the future. And those people that want to gain weight and hire me to be their nutrition coach also tend to express the interest of working with me long-term, because that has to be the case. Because one, we know that gaining weight happens across a long period of time. Second would be, if it's not long-term and we go through this phase where we did this experiment, we got all the information, but you decide to stop your coaching, then it's like, yeah, sure, we won't be able to use it anytime because you're not even working with me anymore, So I think at the end of the day, like I would say the hierarchy of nutritional needs, the last one on top of the pyramid where people don't really come to me is when they are trying to gain weight. But I do say that there's a benefit if you can afford it, right? Like, I'm not saying that everybody who wants to gain weight should hire a nutrition coach, right? So, but I'd say that there can be benefits depending on the coach you work with. But yeah, I do think that there can be a certain age, but obviously the burden is not as high because, you're not like, you will make weight regardless. It's more about like, how are we gonna maximize your performance, and what can we gain out of this entire process,
and kind of guide it through. Like if anyone has in sessions, like, look, I want to gain weight, but I want it to be quality. I don't like anyone could gain 10 pounds in a month if you just want to eat like an idiot, right? If you just want to just go hog wild, sure. But someone might be like, I want to be healthy. I want to gain like quality weight. I want to gain muscle mass. Like you could help set realistic goals for that. Like, look at, okay, for like, what would be realistic goals in terms of gaining muscle mass for a natural athlete, for a man? I know this is probably depends on size as well. That it probably goes up, down, depending on how big you are already. Is that probably the case? Like if you're an 83 or if you're 120, the amount of muscle mass you could put on by surplus of eating and stuff like that? Do you know? Or
yeah, 100%. I think that's like this super, like, I mean, it might be published really soon. I'm not sure when. So this is a study that I was like partially involved in, spearheaded by Eric Helms. So we look at different amount of different rate of weight gain, and different rate of weight gain, and how does it impact muscle gain and strength. So we had a maintenance group, we had a 5% surplus, and we have a 15% surplus, right? And essentially what we saw was that the group that were in a surplus, gained a similar amount of muscle, but the 15% group got fatter, right? And the interesting thing here was that none of the groups actually got stronger than the other, even compared to the maintenance, right? Granted that the program was not designed specifically as like a powerlifting program, right? It's like more like higher repetition work, right? And it's also like short term, it's 8 weeks long, okay? So granted, there are all those like limitations imposed upon it, but I think it gives you a nice like sort of like background information that if you're gaining weight too quickly within 8 weeks, right? You know that you're not going to put on more strength, you're not going to put on more muscle, you're just going to get like fat. And if you have to cut all those fat out at the end, you're just like going 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, because you make life harder for you. Not to mention, I also do think that in terms of rate of weight gain, there are other studies that showed like I think like Garth and colleagues in 2011, they showed that if you gain more like weight, you also still put on like more fat. It doesn't really change much at all in terms of your muscle gain. So based on that projection, usually we say like anywhere from like 1% per month, right, of weight gain usually tend to correlate well with minimizing fat gain and maximizing lean mass gain. So that's kind of like what I would usually ballpark. And the reason why I usually ballpark 1% instead of like the higher ranges of like 1.5 is because most people, when they come to me for nutrition coaching, they already have some form of resistance training background. Because it's very rare that like someone who is like, 6 months into powerlifting, I'm going to hire a coach, I'm going to hire a nutrition coach at the same time. Because you're a complete beginner, you probably don't want to, and you don't even know whether you're thinking of staying long in the sport. So you're not sure whether you're going to be willing to invest money in something that you don't think might last, right? But the fact of the matter is that most people who just start out has the greatest potential to put on the most amount of muscle mass the quickest. So most people that already come to me, they already have like some years of resistance training. So the longer you have in resistance training, the slower the rate of muscle gain would be. So I usually just ballpark someone around like 1% per month, which is roughly 0.25% per week. However, 0.25% per week is quite hard to detect because, if you measure average body weight, if you eat out, right, you can go up by 0.25% just because of like the amount of sodium or like the food, or even if you eat like a late meal, and let's just say you usually eat at 8 p.m. and then you wake up at like 7, but that day you're busy at work and you eat at like 11 p.m., right? That could increase your morning weight the next day. So it's not really week to week, it's like not sensitive enough to be detected. Therefore, like I think my role as a coach is to be able to kind of like identify and distinguish between what are the things that causing the weight to go up, and essentially you're just looking at trends over time. And for me, that is what I usually tell the people I work with. I say like, cool, 1% per month, right? And if you gain 1% per month, I can say that, and these factors are accounted for, you probably can have gains of muscle. And obviously it's also like training related. So if you're not training that 1% per month, likely it's not going to be for muscle, you know?
Right.
So
yeah, there's exactly. That's where, yeah. In how would that work in terms of age? Like, are some people capped where if they come to you like in their 30s or whatever, they're mature athletes, is it like, look, you might be at your optimal, like this besides minor gains, or is there always more gains to be had? Or do we know, is there a lot of studies on that in terms of when people will no longer put on more additional muscle mass?
So I think like that. I mean, I don't actually know if there are any studies out there, but based on like the background knowledge and experience that I have, would probably assume that there are certain factors that will play a role, right? Obviously, higher baseline testosterone level, right? When you're younger, might increase the probability of putting on muscle mass quicker, right? Compared to someone who is like they're slightly older age. I don't think that there is a cap per se, because unless you, so I don't think there's like, I think anybody who starts can put on muscle mass. I don't think that when you're 40, you won't be able to put on muscle mass, right? But maybe the rate might be very different. I actually don't really know if there are any studies out there, but based on the things that I actually, the background knowledge that I have that is not directly related does tell me that, I would probably say that you can put on muscle mass regardless of your age. In fact, I do think that people who are older should actually focus on putting on muscle, right? Because when you start hitting 60, you go through like a phenomenon called sarcopenia, which is like you lose muscle, right? And sarcopenia has like a lot of like bad outcomes, right, related towards it, especially when you're much older. So I do think that I don't want people to use an excuse that, oh, I'm not my prime anymore, I can't put on muscle, so I'm not going to put on muscle, right? I think that the older you are, muscle is actually much more useful when you. Yeah, so not sure if I really answered the question, but yeah.
Okay, so I was saying I have a buddy who's about 215 pounds in the gym, young guy, around 21 years old, strong, lifts routinely, claims he's eating 1,500 calories. Maybe he's got super duper slow metabolism. Couple questions I have. When you hear something like that, and he's a pretty muscular guy, do alarm bells go off on you in terms of this probably is more a case that you're not tracking properly? Because that seems very odd. Like, what are abnormally low calorie intakes? And not only that, but also when people are cutting, what are some ranges in terms of low that you start to see problems? And by problems, obviously, like we've heard of females where it hits hormones, it hits male hormone as well. But, where you're like, look, at anything below this calorie range, it's starting to things can get dicey. Things could probably get dangerous. And this might change by body weight. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I think that there is something to be said, right? Everybody is quite different. I mentioned previously you have this thrifty versus spendthrift phenotype. So people who tend to gain weight easier or versus people who don't. I do think that I wouldn't say dangerous, but I said levels that you want to avoid would probably be under your BMR. So, under your basal metabolic rate. So we have basically basal metabolic rate is just that if you're lying down, not doing anything, the amount of calories that your body expend to maintain normal human functions, right? Just your bodily processes, right? And then on top of that, you have your total energy. So there's BMR, and then you have your TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. That usually factors in NEAT, which is like your activity, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, thermic effect of food, all that kind of stuff. So I generally would say that, you probably don't want to go under your basal metabolic rate, and how do you find your basal metabolic rate? I think that the easiest way is just that you just go online, just type Cunningham equation. So like, and I think that Cunningham equation probably gives you a good estimate of where your basal metabolic rate should be. Other than that, you also can go into like the NIH website. So I think you type NIH like BMR calculator, right, in Google, you should be able to find out what your basal metabolic rate. The reason why I use those two is because they tend to be slightly more like accurate in terms of like formula and equation. All right, it also like helps people take the guesswork out. But generally, I would say that we have to do some form of evaluation on their kind of like energy intake, their expenditure, how sedentary they are, whether they're tracking, do they even understand like what to track, right? Or are they eating things like they assume doesn't have calories, or if they're eating out and they're just estimating their calories, how often do they eat out? So there are multiple factors that goes into this. But my first instinct is to like speak to them and ask them. I don't want to doubt that they're not accurately reporting, right? I don't think that having extreme doubt and skepticism on what your potential like clients would say is actually a healthy coach-athlete relationship, right? So I would kind of understand their lifestyle first, right? And then I say, so walk me through a day and how are your eating habits and eating patterns like? And then tell me how it is. And then based on that, we kind of like make some I would make some mental notes and say, oh, okay, cool. Maybe he eats out then. Some people do think that, like artificial sweeteners, right? They don't really have calories, but the fact that they do, this is like really low. But if they use a lot of it, it adds up over time. Like certain sugar alcohols. There are a lot of things that people think that, it's like calorie free, but they're actually they're not calorie free. They're just like really low calories, but it does add up over time. So there are things like this where I'll kind of like evaluate first. But I'm also, there would be a time when people are very individual. So, like I said, look at the thrifty phenotype, the spender phenotype. There are certain people that may bias towards one or the other. And yeah, we just go from there. It's really hard for me to kind of like pinpoint what the exact cause is for this person's quote unquote metabolism to be so low. Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a super tough deck of cards to be dealt if you're that big and you can only have a G and like 1,500 calories. It's like, damn, man, you can't, that's very difficult, but it is what it is. I guess it does happen. Is there a way of slowing your own metabolism down by, if you're dieting too long, does your metabolism start slowing down?
So yeah, actually there's a super interesting area of research that I mean, it's not recent, but it's like popped up into the conversation again. So if we tie it back to the conversation that we had just now about metabolism slowing down due to age, so we are excluding people who are like 60, right? Right. Let's just say most people would roughly be around 20 to 60. So we are in that stable range. There's something called like the constrained energy model. So like this thing is like made popularized by the same researcher, Herman Ponce. So what the constrained energy model actually says is that our quote unquote metabolism, right, or total daily energy expenditure is like, that's like roughly a cap. Okay. So even if you kind of exercise a lot or try to create a big energy expenditure, right, your body would downregulate other systems in your body so that it doesn't really change your total daily energy expenditure too much. And the studies that he actually done was he looked at hunter-gatherer populations, right, and they used doubly labeled water, right, which is the gold standard of measuring total daily energy expenditure. And he compared that to like people who are like just corporate America, and they basically had the same energy expenditure when you kind of equate for all the factors, like equate for weight, equate for muscle mass, and all that kind of stuff. So they basically showed that the hunter-gatherers who are on their feet every day had very, very similar levels for total daily energy expenditure with people who are just like relatively sedentary, So that sort of like started the conversation around a constrained energy model. And this was also like a surprise to the researchers at that point.
So does this mean, just so I know I'm understanding, just in case. So essentially what you're saying is your activity level won't adjust your metabolism. Is that what that's saying? Okay.
Yeah. So if you put this in like a journalist on the New York Times or whatever, they'd be like, exercise doesn't do anything for your metabolism, right? So people will often use this like clickbait headline, right? But the thing is this, right? There are certain factors as well. I think like certain studies actually show that kind of like help us think about it in slightly better terms. This is that when you are reaching a certain threshold, because like the hunter-gatherers, right, they are those that are like every day they're on their feet. So there's a certain threshold. If you are like really sedentary and you don't move at all, when you start moving, right, or you start walking, right, let's just say like increase your daily step count, there would be an increase in your sort of like quote unquote metabolism, right? Using metabolism very, very synonymously with total daily energy expenditure, because it's less of a mouthful to say. So your metabolism increase when you go from sedentary to moderately active. What the energy constraint model proposes is that it once you exceed a certain threshold where you go like from moderately active to like very, very active, your total daily energy expenditure doesn't increase beyond that. So there's some form of like energy compensation. So your body compensates for that, whether that is like down regulation, like your body just uses less energy to down regulates like your bodily function, right? So anything that's not related towards energy expenditure is like down regulated. And certain studies have actually shown like it's roughly around like 28 to 30% energy compensation. So if you are like, let's say, burning 100 calories, usually if you like go run the mile, right, you roughly burn around 100 calories per mile. So the energy compensation around 30% happens, which means that you are probably only getting around burning 70 calories instead of the full 100. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean it's zero, right? It's not like it's completely zero. It's just that the energy there is a level of energy compensation that your body would happen. And if you think about it from like an evolutionary perspective, there is some form of merit towards it, because you just can't like exercise all the time and then you basically exercise yourself to your body just disintegrates, so your body will find ways to compensate for it. And the factors that actually impact it as well would so far there are three like main factors. One is that the amount of activity you're doing, right? So the higher you are in terms of increasing your energy levels, the bigger the compensation. So some studies showed like one group had X amount, right, and then they burned X amount of calories, and then another group had higher amount, but the higher amount, let's just say, is double the activity. So if you use an additive model, meaning that it just adds up, right? Additive means you just add energy expenditure and you double it, your energy expenditure should double, right? The group that for example, like double the energy expenditure actually didn't have double the amount of energy expended, right? So there is some form of like, it's not a linear relationship. It's more like flattens out slowly, right? So that shows us that.
Does that mean the metabolism did slow, but just
yes? So it's slowed down, but yeah, it's not linear, right? So it's not like for every mile you go 100 calories and ad infinitum. It's just that maybe when you reach like the 5 mile mark, you go from, instead of 100 calories per mile, it becomes 50 calories per mile, right? So there's like, instead of a rise, a linear line like that, it goes like this, so it flattens out over time once you reach a certain threshold. So that's determined by activity level. Another thing would be energy deficit. So the bigger energy deficit you are in, right, the energy compensation happens earlier. So if you're in a deficit versus you're in a caloric surplus, so the study actually showed that when you're in a caloric surplus, you tend to be, the additive model basically is a clearer reflection, meaning that if you're not in a deficit, it's more linear than if you are, right? Which kind of makes sense, because if you're starting with a lower energy baseline, you give your body more reasons to compensate, to minimize the energy expenditure, because what your body is looking at is not looking at purely from mechanistic work in, work out. It's more about like the amount of energy my body has to expand. So if you're already starting at a baseline that's lower, when you're trying to expand more, your body would down regulate and compensate more. And the last factor that actually impacts it is like BMI. They found that people who have a higher BMI tends to compensate more. Yep.
Sorry, sir. The Wi-Fi is not our friend today, but you were talking about the metabolic rate in relation to BMI.
Yeah. So what they showed was that people with higher BMI tend to have like a higher energy compensation, meaning that for a similar level of activity that someone is doing, let's just say person A and person B, they are both trying to expand or burn 100 calories. The person B has a higher BMI, they might compensate great more compared to the person that is that has a lower BMI. So this is when they did the study, it wasn't like a causal mechanism. They just like surveyed they just surveyed the people with higher BMI. And it could be causal, it could be not. It could be that people who have a higher BMI tend to compensate more, or people that compensate more led them to have a higher BMI, right? Or it could be both, right? It could be some other factor, but that's just the three things that kind of like impacts kind of this like metabolism. While, like I said, this is not actually like, while there has been a lot of like steam in this area of research, I'm not saying that this is like a definite thing, because there are also methodological methods. So people say like, oh, doubly labeled water, which I measured just now, is like a gold standard, but they're more like gold standard in like free living. Can it be used in terms of like exercising population? And there are like certain ongoing discussions on whether like the statistical methods used to quantify all of this, because all of these are just models, right? Are actually useful. So I'm not saying that this is a fact, right? But I'm saying that it makes sense, right? There is a likelihood that it would happen, right? And the compensation does happen to a degree if you think about it from like a evolutionary perspective as well, right? Just to kind of like summarize the three things that kind of like would impact that energy compensation in the constraint model, right? So the constraint model is that your metabolism is like sort of like have an upper cap, is that the first one is that whether you're in a surplus or deficit, so energy intake. Second factor would be your activity level, and the third factor would be BMI. So these are the three things that kind of like may impact your metabolism in the constraint model.
One more question I got. Okay. Also, is there something to do with particular muscle, the amount of muscle mass you carry around? Do they know for fact, or is it?
So they equate that for muscle mass. And I think muscle mass is a very interesting conversation, because I think while gaining muscle mass does increase your metabolism, right? People often give it more credit than it should. Most of your muscle mass actually comes from like your bodily functions. And if you like, there's a study actually like that by basically like Wang, W-A-N-G, and colleagues, right? And they actually showed that specific muscle groups, like contribution of how much calories your major organs and tissues burn per kilo, and muscle actually isn't a lot, right, compared to like your liver, your kidney, and all that kind of stuff. So it is actually a very interesting thing to, while muscle does contribute, it doesn't really contribute as much as people think. So people actually took that study, and based off that, they made some like calculation, and they said that if you gain like 500 grams of muscle, your metabolism increased enough to the point where you can eat like three grapes. Yeah.
Damn.
So that's like,
it's a lot of work for 3 grapes, my man.
Basically that, yeah. So it does actually show you that, muscle mass does play a role, because when people hit 60, right, they go through like sarcopenia, like a lot, like massive, like reduction in muscle mass. Then that's why their metabolism drop. But I also think like this is just a complete like theory in my head. I might be completely wrong, because I haven't seen any research that ties both and both. So fun fact out there for people that don't know, I did my master's degree in carbohydrate. I basically look at carbohydrate for endurance training. So I studied endurance training, even though I'm a powerlifter, just purely out for like fascination, and just understanding how the body works. And something that's really interesting in terms of like endurance training is people always talk about like mitochondria. So mitochondria, I'm not sure if you heard of it. It's basically like the powerhouse of the cell, right? And increasing basically endurance training, one way is to obviously look at the utilization of fuel, right? And the second thing is to also improve like mitochondrial quality or mitochondrial biogenesis, which just means increasing the amount of mitochondria in your body. So there's this like super interesting study, right, that showed that what they showed was that mitochondria, they did it in mice, right? Because there are certain studies where you cannot do like intentionally like block certain receptors in humans, because it's like not ethical. So they did it in mice, and they actually showed that when the mice increase their like mitochondria like capacity, right, they actually had lower metabolism. Okay, so when they had a lower metabolism by increasing mitochondria capacity. So in my head, I'm like, when people actually start exercising, right, they go through a certain level of improved mitochondria, right, quality, or maybe that's amount or the ability of the mitochondria function. So their metabolism might go up slightly, but if they keep like increasing their energy expenditure, meaning that they have to work potentially their mitochondria just gets more efficient, right? Hence, like the mitochondria efficiency reduces the overall energy expenditure by being more efficient, So that is perhaps one of the reasons. I'm not saying that's the only reason, right? Like I said, the body might downregulate other functions as well in the body, but that might be one of the reasons why you don't burn as many quote unquote calories. So once you are reaching a certain level of threshold. Interestingly enough, they also showed like being in a calorie deficit sometimes does increase mitochondrial quality. So if you stack 2 and 2 together, perhaps there is something to be said. Like I said, this literally the paper on the mice paper is not even like published yet. So it's like accepted, but not actually out for publication, or maybe it's online, right? So this might be just completely like I might be completely wrong here, but I'm just drawing certain inferences. And when people go through sarcopenia, right, people actually not just lose muscle, but they go through huge reduction in mitochondrial quality as well. The mitochondrial quality just like go down. So perhaps that is the reason why you see some form of tailing off of metabolism in respective to both muscle and mitochondria. I cannot like tease out one from the other. So I just think that this is like fascinating areas of research, right? Because at the end of the day, all of these things, when they look at energy expenditure, they look at it from the perspective of endurance exercise, right? Or like running, right? And running is like directly impacts like mitochondrial adaptation, whereas resistance training might not impact mitochondrial adaptation as much. So it's hard to say which is which. And it's definitely like a selection bias, because I can't really say that, if you're expending X amount of calories, right, through doing resistance training, right, will that happen? I don't know. But, obviously there's going to be a point where if you're doing so many reps, resistance training isn't really resistance training anymore. It just becomes endurance, right? So, there might be something to be said about the mitochondria efficiency. And interestingly, in the rat study, the mice study where I mentioned that why we couldn't do it in humans, because they selectively like remove certain factors in their in the mouse, and that thing called TLCL, I think, TLCL. When they remove it, it prevents the increase of mitochondria, right? And that allowed the mice, right, to maintain their metabolism, which is like very, very interesting. So
who knows what's going to happen in the future then?
Yeah, but you can't really. But the interesting thing is this: in humans, if you remove that TLCL thing, they go through sarcopenia, right? So and then when you go through sarcopenia, your metabolism drops, right? So I think that there's like disjunction between metabolism in mice and humans. Obviously, there is some carryover, but you always say you can't carry over, like you can't extrapolate the mouse studies directly to humans, because the lifespans of like rats and mouse are shorter than humans. So metabolism might be heightened, like they're born quicker in rats compared to humans. So there might be some like disjunction there. So you cannot exactly say this is this. And I don't know what CRISPR will allow, whether you can actually ablate or like remove your TLCL and then try to hack your metabolism. But so far, any form of hacking in your in humans hasn't really worked. So this thing is borderline unethical and not safe. So I don't know what will happen in the year 2100. But yeah, that's some research there.
I mean, when we look at what we're doing now and look at with AI coming about and what might happen, who the frick knows what we're capable of even in 30 years. We have now already people who are like 55 now and people who were like 55 in the 1970s. It is so different, like the quality of life, what they look like just based off of information, lifestyles, and a lot of things we're doing. But who knows what we're going to be able to do once we start tinkering with things. But that's out of the realm. I want to ask you also about alcohol in that playing a role. How, because it's calories. Someone's trying to explain to me. I remember, a bodybuilder friend of mine was talking about how to properly log alcohol, as well as you hear different stories on what alcohol does to the body. What alcohol does possibly to an athlete or does to like muscle. And is it like a toxin poison like people say, or is it not as bad as people say. I know there's different type. It depends on the research you get, but
so I think that the thing to kind of ask is that, first of all, we look at the logging, right? So alcohol has calories. And the thing is that if you use if you just generate a spreadsheet and you just put protein, carbohydrates, and fat, right? And protein and carbohydrates is 1 gram, you get 4 calories. Fat, 1 gram, you get 9 calories. You don't put alcohol in there, right? You will not be able to account for that, because 1 gram of alcohol has 7 calories, right? So it's one of this it was one of this thing where it's like rogue, but
gotcha.
One thing that we look at is in terms of in specific sort of like athletic performance or muscle mass or like powerlifting related things. There are 2 things that we have to look at. One is how does alcohol impact weight gain or weight loss? So you have the immediate impact of consuming alcohol leading to an increase in calorie consumption. That's one. Second, you have the habitual impacts of the behavioral changes that alcohol brings. So if you drink a lot of alcohol, you have lower inhibition. You probably want to eat something and you crave some like oily food, and definitely reduces your self-control. We know many people, whether in real life or in the news, or like the latest celebrity gossip column, where people just do all kinds of crazy stuff when they're drunk, right? So I don't need to expand on that. So, but in just terms of eating, and I mean, we've seen some crazy stuff.
Are you talking about South Africa, what I did? Because I apologize. No, I'm joking.
I mean, those people who are in South Africa, and if they saw Yuki, they know what I'm talking about.
Okay, man. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So you just you make poor decisions, right? And that poor decision usually extends to food as well. So it's the not just the calories you get from alcohol, but the potential calories that you may incur once you have lower self-control. So that sort of like factors in towards the energy balance, sort of like weight gain, weight loss equation, right? So now that we got that out of the picture, then we can talk about the second thing, which is how does alcohol kind of like impair like training or performance. So alcohol definitely impairs sleep, all right? So if you have a lot of alcohol close to bedtime, while you may say, oh, I slept like a baby, right? You don't actually, your sleep quality would actually be impacted by it, right? So it's kind of like tricky, and it often paints the misconception that alcohol may be helpful for sleep, because alcohol does have a slight sedative effect, but just because it puts you to sleep doesn't mean that you have good sleep quality, right? Same goes with caffeine. People say that, oh yeah, I can have caffeine and go to sleep. Yeah, sure, you can go to sleep, but that doesn't mean that your sleep quality would be good, and sleep quality does matter. So alcohol can impact sleep. It can also cause like dehydration if you're not consuming enough fluids, right? Most people tend to be okay, because depending on the alcohol you consume, a lot of alcohol actually has fluids as well. Like, beer is like 5% alcohol, the rest of it is like fluids. But obviously, if you're freaking downing shots, right, all the time, right, and you're not drinking enough water, right, then you may go through slight dehydration. But that dehydration is easily kind of like, you can override it by just drinking heaps of water the next day. And the last bit will actually be like certain signaling pathways in your body, right? And like recent studies actually show that moderate alcohol consumption, doesn't really impair muscle hypertrophy and like protein synthesis. But when you consume a lot of it, then it does impair certain markers in your body that are important for like muscle protein synthesis. So that is something that I would say that more on a deeper like molecular level, how alcohol impacts that. And the bottom line really is like the poison is in the dose, So if you can like 1 glass of wine, probably would not change, would not impact things. And don't like, the worst thing I would want somebody to come out to me and say, oh, I'm drinking wine for the antioxidant benefits. I'm like, mate, there's other ways to get your antioxidant benefits by like eating a freaking tomato. You don't need your 5 glasses of wine. So don't give me the excuse when people come.
You say tomato, I say glass of wine.
Yeah. Or I say that you try to increase your muscle mass by 500 grams so you can eat 3 grapes, because you probably get the antioxidant from the grapes as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Also, what about caffeine? Does caffeine dehydrate you? Do you know?
Nah, no, not really. It doesn't. So like it's like a myth, right? So people often say like, oh, caffeine dehydrates you, but I don't, like, it doesn't there isn't really any like good backing that it does.
What are like does coffee itself maybe like the coffee bean itself, like something about coffee, is that dehydrating? Because there's also talk of that sometimes you hear.
Yeah, I think like a lot of this is like unfounded. Especially if you are looking at it creates like a diuretic effect, meaning that it causes your body to like potentially pee more, but it's like just too mild, right, to actually cause like dehydration. Not to mention that coffee, some may even be like help people. It may actually help someone be more hydrated because coffee contains water, right? It's the same thing with alcohol, right? Alcohol, like if beer is like 5% alcohol, but like it contains water, so it may actually increase hydration for some people, all right? And yeah, I don't think that neither yeah, I don't think it is actually like dehydrating or
Gotcha. Is there are there some key points that you think would do? We're getting close to 3 hours, and this has been absolutely gold. And I thank you for this. This was we covered so much on this, and a lot of it pertaining to like powerlifting performance, bulking, cutting, right up to the competition. Like this was good. I told you beforehand when you're coming in, I have a working knowledge, but that's it. Obviously, this is not my expertise. Didn't go to school for this, so. But I do track my calories, I track my macros, and I do listen to the podcasts, hang out with Lane Norton, ask questions here and there, but that's it. Hang out with you and see you guys at different events, but that's about it. And I think a lot of people who are listening to the podcast probably have more of a working knowledge or maybe even less. So I think this is going to be a huge jump up for them. Is there any points that you think we might have missed, or do you think we hit most of the key points that you were thinking of as well?
Yeah, I think that most important in terms of like weight cutting, like this general nutrition, right? I would say that planning ahead really helps. So there's this overarching nutrition theme. Planning ahead really helps. Having more time to think about your plan actually helps. So that's one. I mean, I think that we also talk about like the myths. So I kind of like to reiterate and summarize the myth would be your anabolic window is larger than you think it is. Eating immediately after weigh-in is overrated, probably not needed. And then metabolism related myths was to be like, once you're 30, your metabolism goes down the drain, right? So I think that's another myth that we kind of like covered. So I think that like there were multiple other things that we talked about clearly because this is almost 3 hours long, but I think that like summarizes it quite quickly. So yeah, I don't know. Like usually end this with playing the name game, but I don't know what are you gonna do with this podcast?
I didn't even think about the name game with this. But yeah, what the hell? I could toss a few names out there. Just for fun. What the hell, man? We got you here. Yeah, my mind totally was not on the name game. But for sure, anybody listening stuff, we can obviously have Kedric back and answer questions and do Q&A and whatnot. I was going to post it on the King of Lifts, taking in questions, but then I had coming into this a few points and I wanted it kind of like we did it, where it's a little more segmented and easily streamed through, from like backing up to bulking to maintenance to cutting to the water cut. And I thought if I took questions, randomized questions, we'd be kind of a little bit all over the place and be harder for me and for myself, because I just don't have that working knowledge. If we bounced around, I get lost. And I think if we just had, I know the timeline of like training. So if you could walk me through the timeline of training, I'll be able to pace myself, ask follow-up questions as it pertains to training. I was like, that's probably the easiest way. Because if we go from topic to topic straight up in nutrition, and some people are going to ask questions that are probably way over my level, I'm like, all right, I don't even know what we're talking about right now. So I was hesitant anyways. You never know where these things are going to go, but maybe next time we could open it up and see what the heck, or you can open it up or ask questions and we could like prep ahead of time. But
I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, that, and this is not my feeble attempt to get me back on the podcast within the next in a slightly less time than 4 years, right? Because 4 years ago was the last time I was here.
We're like the Olympics, baby. We're once every 4 years.
Or the World Games or something, right?
That's right.
But if you want to like, if you have questions and you want to do like, okay, cool, you know, like if King of the Lifts has like monthly nutrition segment where you just answer questions, and it doesn't have to be like 3 hours long. It could be like, okay, we spend 45 minutes and I answer as many questions as I can in 45 minutes. And if we cut it off at 45 minutes and whatever's left, we just put it in the next thing. And you want to do like monthly Q&A nutrition with Kedric, that can be something that you can think about. So it's up to you.
Dude, I appreciate that's a really good idea. It's a really good idea, man, for people listening, firing questions. We could collect some and whatnot, and you could do the same as well. Be like, look at here's some questions I've been getting, and we could just wrap these up. And you're right, yeah, they don't always have to be 3 hours, and we don't always have to talk strictly nutrition as well, because for anyone listening, you're a straight up powerlifting coach as well, and you're at all the different events. We have tons of stories. You're a super freaking funny guy, and you're a great storyteller, and we could have on a couple different people and just do like, you know, the regular podcasting. All right. I'll fire off a couple names for the name game. For anyone listening, if this is the first time hearing, Kendrick, you could do one word, you could do 2 words, you could do a story, you could do as much or as little as you want, but you can just do one word if you like. Let's do some people you work with then. Taylor Atwood.
Hard worker, undoubtedly insane work ethic, and still the GOAT in my eyes.
Leah Babwa.
Oh, absolutely lovely person. And once again, super hard worker. And, you know, someone that I think that if she doesn't powerlift and I don't do powerlifting coaching, would still be a good friend.
Gavin
Aiden. Insane amount of self-belief and confidence. Super strong, probably one of the strongest lifters I've seen. Can do slightly better in terms of his nutrition. Sorry, Gavin, I love you. I love you, but
God bless. Eric Helms.
Oh, friend, mentor, and you know, all the other nice things, sugar, spice, and everything nice, and absolutely monumental in terms of my development as a coach and a person.
Someone else from the powerlifting nutrition world, Lane Norton.
Really intelligent, smart. Obviously has both strength and knowledge to back up, but not as big a fan of calling out people. But that's just my personality. It might be
you're about to get called out, I bet you. Not joking. Have you met Lane?
I've never met Lane. I haven't been to the States. Yeah, I haven't been to the States.
Yeah, that's right. Fair enough then. Yeah. How about Jason Tremblay?
Oh, ever since it might be a little bit long story here, but ever since I left like TSG to start my own company with like Alfred was also a TSG coach, right? But when I look back, everything that I have right now, it somehow or other was linked to Jason Tremblay and TSG. Like meeting Eric Helms, doing my PhD, right? Jason put the good word in. Jason and I met when I was in the UK doing my master's, right? That was when I was an intern. You know, he opened the opportunity for me to meet Eric Helms and do a PhD, right? He made the introduction. He allowed me to coach Taylor Atwood. So fun fact is that I didn't plan to be the guy who's like specialized in like weight cutting, right? But I was doing a survey for my PhD, evaluating some weight cutting methods because it was like tangentially related to some other PhD topic that I was interested in. And Jason and Debbie Tremblay, which is Jason's mom, started giving me the moniker Dr. Weight Cut, and that name just stuck. And then somehow or other, I was just like quote unquote forced into the role, and I just embraced it. And I just kind of like made it my basically my coaching livelihood now. And without Jason, I would probably wouldn't have ended up here. I wouldn't meet Alfred, right? Because I wouldn't be a part of TSG. And I also applied to other like coaching companies to be an intern as well. All right. It's just that yeah, all the others failed. TSG accepted me. That's how I met Alfred. That's how Reformance started. That's how I met Eric Helms. That's how I started doing the weight cutting. My emergence, as I mentioned at the start, was with Taylor Atwood. Without Taylor Atwood, who knows where I would be, right? So yeah, I just immense gratitude and thanks to Jason Tremblay, even though we're no longer working in the same company.
It's crazy that other people didn't take you in. Obviously they wouldn't have known what you became when, having worked with all these people now and everything you've done. But isn't it crazy that you would apply to like other places and Jason took you and some other people might not have. And now they'd look back and like, damn, it's crazy. It just goes to show, like, it's one of those stories where Michael Jordan, I'm not saying you're the Michael Jordan in nutrition. That's kind of whatever. You're good. I don't know if you're the GOAT, but like Michael Jordan didn't make it on his high school basketball team. Freaking Einstein failed math. It's one of those deals where you hear about these people. The Rocky movie was denied like 30 times over. Harry Potter was denied, like the books was denied so many times over. And these are multi-million-dollar franchises that Rocky's from the 70s and they're still making Rocky movies, and freaking with Creed now, and like same where it's one of those deals where it's like everyone gets rejected. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means someone doesn't see it in you, but that doesn't mean you don't have it in you. And you just need to find your Jason Tremblay or whoever's going to give you a go.
Yeah. I think that speaks a lot. I mean, even you mentioned Einstein, I say I kind of relate a little bit more because he's in like academic field, not because I think I would be the Einstein, but Einstein at the start was like a late speaker. So like, didn't start speaking to a really late age as well. So right from the start, he was like, people always think like, this guy's probably going to be dumb, like, especially in that age where, modern science is not as available, like late speaking babies are actually more normal than people think, right? People think, oh, this guy's going to be dumb, right? But I think that, when I look back, like, I'm super humbled because I didn't like plan my life course to be here where I am. I'm not like, oh yeah, in the year 2023, I'm going to be at Sheffield. I'm going to coach 4 lifters at Sheffield. One of them is going to do a sneak attack and take and be the best female out of Sheffield. I didn't plan any of that, but, when I look back, it's just that, yeah, sometimes when people just tell you no, you just have to keep going, right? And at the end of the day, what is there to lose? If you're not gonna go, you're gonna still stay at the bottom, right? Like if people even people throw me some like change, I'll take the change because right now I have like I don't even have $1 with me. If you throw me like 20 cents, I'm gonna collect 20 cents till I have $1, and we just keep going from there, and when I look back, it's just like I'm absolutely humbled to be where I am right now. Like I said, when I first started powerlifting, like coaching and all that, I like read Mike Tusher's reactive training manual back in 2008, and I was like, man, this thing was like the emergence of the RPE for training, and like this was like way over my head, right? And now like Mike T and I, like we do like podcasts together, we speak, we discuss training ideas. I'm like, say, I wouldn't even like dare associate myself to be on the level of Mike T, even if we look at like nutrition, because Mike T has been in the game for so long. But to be able to like, speak to someone that you looked at and learn from when you are like just starting, and to be able to speak to them now, that's just like, it's such like a privilege and like really humbling for me. So yeah, I guess that's big, man. Like there's something to be said about just work. And today I still feel the same. I tell people this, like, what if I coach someone, right, with the nutrition who was in the same situation as Evie Corrigan, right, trying to cut from the 57 to the 52, made weight, didn't have an impact on performance, but this person wasn't at Sheffield, I would still be as happy as I would coaching Evie, So it's not like because I've achieved some form of fame that there are people that are way beyond my reach, And the only justification I would probably give to be able to coach elite lifters compared to someone else is probably that elite lifters has a smaller margin of error, and due to my ability, I can kind of minimize the error, right? So they probably need more focus, but it's not really because, I don't see them as trophies, right? I don't see them as like, I don't see these elite lifters as thing to like boost my career. I think that in terms of like the entire training career of a lifter or an athlete, I I would just be a chapter inside, but I would never be the front cover, right? The front cover always has to be them. I would just be a chapter. I would just be a chapter, and who knows, down the road they may have different coaches, they might have other different chapters. But when you look back at their career and they read the story of their life, there's this chapter that Kedric Kwan helped this lifter, but I would never say I want to be on the front cover, So, yeah.
I would demand to write the foreword.
Yeah, that's fine. I would demand some pictures as well.
That's right, doggy. That's right. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. The dicey part we kind of touched up on earlier is like when it's an elite level lifter, Evie Corrigan in Sheffield, holy smokes, because it's the biggest of big stages, goes well. Oh, absolutely can change career-wise. Like it's a huge casting call. I realize being a nutrition coach isn't quite like being a programming coach where you're not quite as in front in our sport anyways. But like when Joey Flex talks about when John Hack and Brett Gibbs had that massive showdown and John Hack beat Brett Gibbs in 2016, literally his whole career was based off of that initially. And then he had another bump when Russell Orhe came and defeated Brett. But like you have bumps. But like, it's a little different for nutrition because it's not quite, the lead singer of the band. It's more the guitarist or bassist or whatever. I get it. Because at least for our sport and other sports like bodybuilding, it would be. But it does help in terms of, when you do get an Eve and you're like, okay, everyone's watching. If this doesn't go well, everyone's watching. So that's tough, right? Pressure wise. However, if you knock it out the park like you did with Evie, which is anyone try cutting and retaining your strength and do it in a relatively short period of time and blah, blah, blah. You hit a home run here, kid. You hit a grand slam. And I know all these other athletes you work with, like you're good. You deserve to get the kudos. And hopefully it does do a little something for your career because there's something about a lot of people got theories and whatnot, but something about try, tested, and true. The resume. What have you done at the highest of levels and high stakes when it's all risky, multiple athletes in a big show, and you've done it, man. And you've done it over years, which is so it's not some flash in the pan. You're new to the game because like we said, but yeah, it's but yeah, we'll carry on with the name game. But this is what I like about the name game. Some of it's quick. Some of it instigates conversation, and that's all a podcast. People like, but I divert because I went on too long. No, my friend. The name game is just an instigation of conversation, and we just went on a pretty good tangent. Who got us this? Was that Jason Tremblay?
Yeah, Jason Tremblay.
Oh, wow. That was a good one. Okay. Let's see here. Well, how about Evie Corrigan?
The immediate thing that comes to my mind is like I said, give back to the sport. So even her right now with all the fame, I do think that she used all of that to just give back to the sport. And, I've heard her podcast where she said that, I will never stay at 52, I'll go up, and that tells me a lot about a person. Like they stick true to their principles. Powerlifting is about getting stronger, right? And, she spoke to me, she said, 57, who knows? She's built like a 63, like her height. So yeah, I think that strong, great to work with, but give back to the sport a lot.
Russell Orhe.
Never had any interactions with him ever. I don't follow him on Instagram. The only time I see Russ is on King of the Lifts, so I can't really comment on that.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't follow him on Instagram or nothing. Do you follow a lot of people on Instagram or not necessarily?
I try to limit now to the people that I interact with, right? Just because I try to spend too much time on social media.
Yeah.
And
fair.
I try to avoid like any form of like I try to avoid following people that has caused like drama in the past, especially if I don't know them, right? So if I know them, that's a different question. But I just try to avoid that because it's easy to get sucked in, not because I agree or disagree with that, but it's just super easy to get sucked into like the rabbit hole of like the whole drama. And with a lot of like work, the PhD, I need to like reduce my social media time. So
fair enough. Jesus Oliveras.
Absolute beast, super nice guy. Jesus, Mikey D, and Emil Krastev, like the three of us shared warm-up platforms at Sheffield. And I think the three of us had a great time. I speak for myself and Emil, right? To an extent, Emil, but I think that Jesus. I think he stick to his principles a lot as well. Based like one thing that really like struck to me, like stood out to me was that when this was behind the warm-up room and at the warm-up room, and Jesus called Mikey and said, "Oh, Mikey, can you get like Delaney and all like the crew, to come like pray with me before I go?" And like that was like something that really like stood out to me, because like I, as a man of like faith, myself, that showed me like no matter how strong like Jesus is, like he doesn't think that this is all me, like he still like pray whatever. And I think that speaks a lot about a person. So that I haven't interacted with him much, but that moment when I saw that happen at the platform, that like obviously if I can remember it now, it clearly means something.
Jonathan Kaiko.
I love Kaiko. He obviously, the big thing was like we both bond a lot on anime, but he's just like a really lovely person. I don't listen to as many like I said, because I don't spend as much time on social media. I also don't. This is not on you. I don't listen to as many podcasts on like King of the Lifts if there are people that I don't know.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
But I listened to Kaiko's episode, and that like it was really real. Like I enjoyed it a lot, and it made me like it shined a light on why Kaiko is who he is today. So yeah.
And you're in New Zealand, right?
Yes, I am.
Who's coming up in New Zealand that we should be thinking about?
I would say that for the opens, you have the typical like the typical, right. You have Evie Corrigan. Obviously this our second 52 Megan Lee Smith, right? Obviously you have Kalina, you have Tim Monigatti cutting down to 74, right. And we have 84 plus Jewel Tassi. Our female team is quite strong this year, but something to keep an eye on would be our junior world team in Romania. I think that would be something to keep an eye on, because if you ask me who is really up and coming, you look at the juniors, right? And I think that our junior squad is actually would command more attention compared to our open squad, besides the larger names.
Yeah, and how about that Tim Monigatti dropping from, this is perfect for this podcast, dropping from 83 to 74. And I recently posted, he had a 320 kilo, 705 pound deadlift and a 200 and, I don't want to lie, but 80 to 90 kilo squat, maybe even a stitch more. And he's saying this is like PR level, 83 PR level weight that he's shifting. And then in the caption, I was like, man, if he could retain this strength when he makes 74 kilos. And he said in the comments, I'm walking around about 75 to 76 kilos. And I'm like, holy, with that kind of weight? I mean, we'll see. Proof is in the pudding. Let's see what happens. But if he can, he doesn't even need, like, because for anyone listening, if you don't know, Tim has hit 810 as an 83. Like he's a extremely strong 83. If he brought his 83 numbers down, now that wasn't bench, and bench usually does get hit by lack of body size, and we already went through what levers can change. But I mean, even if he's late, if he's anywhere close to 800 or late 700s when he's a 74, holy smokes, this is going to be quite the battle between him and Taylor. Let alone the other 74s are all catching up the rest of the world. When you look at the nominations, it's going to be good, man. Who knows?
Yeah. I think it hinges a lot on how much strength he can retain, on that day itself. The 74 battle is going to be tight, and for the sake, I mean, I don't know Tim as well. I know he's super strong. I think that going into South Africa, he was the strongest at 83. So it really matters about like execution on the platform, and for his sake and for the sake of Team New Zealand, I hope he does fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I think my role as a coach, I tell people, I had this funny conversation with Pete Spence. I said that I'm the kind that I would think of like the worst possible scenario, just because if the worst happens, I want to be ready for it so I can find mitigation measures to overcome it. I asked Pete, man, what happens if the elevator gets stuck when we're going up and we miss our attempts because of that? He said, I haven't thought of that. No, don't talk about it. But like for me, it's like that. The likelihood is low, right? It's small. But if it happens, it can potentially like throw off everything, right? So, but I'm in my nature is just to think of all possible scenarios that can happen so that I'm ready for it. And when I thought about Tim, I'm like, if he does well, he do really well. But if he doesn't, he'll fall down the ranks. Like really, like because the 74 class is just so tight. Even Joshua Wright 730 was nominated 8. Right, he's the last of the of flight A, which means that one mess up, you can literally slip from like potential first, second, all the way to 8 or 9 place. Whereas if Tim was total 800 as an 83, the margin of 800 people totaling 800 at the top 83 level is not as many, right? So even if you slip up, you probably won't slip as bad, right? So just from a probabilistic calculation, right? At that point, when I first saw that, I wasn't sure, but now looking at his training, everything is looking fantastic. If you manage to hang on to whatever it is, I think it'll be
Sorry, dude, my Wi-Fi is killing me right there. But we were talking about Tim Matagatti's cut down and how drastic the cut might be.
Yeah, so I was saying that, like probabilistically wise, at that point when he signed up, I wasn't sure, but I wish he does well. The battle will be tight. I think it'll be just a fantastic show to just watch, and obviously as his fellow New Zealand Kiwi fellow New Zealand coach, I wish he does well, and this thing will be epic to watch.
I mean, look at man, if he takes any inspiration from Evie, and he's like, she did it, and look at surprise what she pulled off. If he takes any, if this becomes the year of the upset with the Kiwis, oof, and they're all cutting down and surprising people, who the frick knows, man? We'll see. It's very exciting though. It's a nice intangible. Yep. It's a nice intangible because some of these other gentlemen, obviously Taylor's coming in and he could be, if he's not 100%, maybe he's going to be good. We know Taylor at 80% is late 700s. You know what I mean? Like he's just that special of a dude. But we know what some of these other 74s are bringing to the table, and they're improving, and they're already into the late 700s. But Tim is that question mark, like Evie Corrigan, who won Sheffield. Tim is that, where it's like, oh, wow, it kind of makes you believe, doesn't it? What Evie did, and Tim's coming from the same nation and doing the same thing. Who knows? Who knows, man? Only time will tell. I love it though. I love question marks around it because it makes you like, I got to tune in. And I love that he just posted that recent training video where he's killing. Like he looks like he could be 800 and up as a 74. Like who knows? Well, only time will tell, buddy. If for everyone listening, how do they get a hold of you for your nutrition services, sir?
So my Instagram is kedric.reformance. You can go on to my Instagram, message me on DMs. I'm not taking any more nutrition lifters until Malta is over. But reformance training, our coaches also do nutrition. Contrary to popular perception, I also do coaching. Alfred, who is my business partner, also does some form of nutrition coaching. So if you want nutrition coaching and you're okay with, you don't really care whether you're working with me or not, definitely hit up one of our coaches or just send an inquiry into our Instagram or email. But yeah, I guess the best way to reach me personally would be my Instagram, kedric.reformance. Yeah.
There it is. Listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you dealing with my Wi-Fi, giving us, 3 hours of content, and we're going to do this again, obviously. And I'll see you in Malta, man. It's going to be a freaking amazing time. Are you there for the whole time?
Yes, I am. I'll see you in Malta. And, at that point, I know that I don't have to ask you to take your shirt off because you'll be taking it off regardless. So
I'll be ready, man. I'll be ready. Thank you for coming on. Everybody listening, please do subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Give us high ratings. Until next time, 6-pack Lapadat, 6 up, and we are out.